Chapter 783. The Outer Islands, the City of Mordor. The fiery red clouds in the sky gradually subsided, and the power from the scorching hell was fading. Even the demons could not change the weather for a long time. The fire rain from the sky was completely with the help of the plane of the scorching hell. If it was cast by magic, it would be a god-level ability. The energy shield of the city of Mordor blocked most of the fireballs. Only the things outside the city were lost. Even the port of Mordor was not affected much. Because at the same time as the fire rain fell from the sky, a protective shield rose from the Temple of the Sea and the Temple of Wealth. The city of Mordor was now the center of the Outer Islands. The floating population here was already very large. For the goddess of wealth, this was her largest source of faith in the material plane. For the goddess of sea, this was an opportunity for her to open her faith in humans. The number of her believers in the city of Mordor was not small. Most of the fishermen and sailors were her believers. Sauron's clergy did not conflict with the two goddesses. According to the inclination of mortals, the three had their own range of believers. The two goddesses took action to resolve the crisis of the port of Mordor. As the fire rain stopped, the next battle was much easier. They only needed to defeat the invading demons. Most of the demons in the scorching hell were Yugros. As the base camp of the demons in the lower plane, the invasion force from this plane was far less than the Abyss and the Baator Inferno. There were hundreds of layers in the Abyss, and the Baator Inferno also had 9 layers. The scorching hell only had 1 layer. As long as the loss slightly exceeded their gain, then the demons would give up on this place as a target. This was a wave of attack. As long as they were beaten badly, the scorching hell would not be able to invade here from now on. This was a good thing. At this time, above the Temple of Mordor, the figure of the High Priest had been shrouded in the light of divinity. She had divinity given by Sauron and could also mobilize the divine power of Sauron. In terms of combat power, she was actually the strongest in Mordor except for Sauron. Psionic Field. Along with the spread of psionic energy, the High Priest's energy field expanded, at the same time establishing a very large spiritual connection. When the Queen of Spiders was killed, the High Priest was a very important force. Her ability was very unique. Even without taking into account her combat ability, just the effect of her psionic energy was already difficult to estimate. The First Legion will need another 1.5 hours to reach the battlefield. The main force of the invasion is the Yugros. Discovered a mutated flaming demon. It should be a variant of the Infernal Inferno. Wyvern Knights have arrived at the battlefield. Shadow Dragon has arrived. The Third Legion guarding the Demon Valley is on its way. About 15 minutes later, they arrived at the battlefield. Saruman has arrived via teleportation. We are currently setting up the protective barrier. The mutated man-eating plants had successfully blocked the demons' first wave of attacks. The High Priest was now a massive information exchange center. She connected a large amount of information to Gloria and the Fallen Witch through telepathy, and the 2 legendary witches continued to issue orders, mobilizing manpower and material resources to reinforce the enemy. At the same time, in a wide plain, groups of demons also appeared in front of them. Facing them head-on was the 3rd Reserve Militia of Mordor City. Fortunately, a small number of soldiers from the 6th Legion were replaced. The former were newly trained newbies, but the latter were veterans who had experienced the Battle of the Pirate King and the crusade against the indigenous people. These veterans were basically warriors with a profession level of 5 or above. It was obviously impossible to stop the invasion of demons by relying on these people, so the support of Mordor City was the most important. The first to arrive was the Wyvern Knights. The Wyverns' flying speed was quite fast, and their departure time was the best. They arrived at the battlefield in the first place. Then there was the Shadow Dragon subdued by the High Priest. The pressure of an adult dragon successfully deterred the demons from the Infernal Inferno, making them a little hesitant. A city that could control dragons was obviously not so easy to deal with. Then Saruman had arrived by teleportation. Since the incident of divinity, Saruman's mastery of plants had become more refined. As he scattered the seeds into the earth, he quickly used special fertilizers as casting props to cast a very strange spell. Then, a huge wall of vines formed in front of him. These vines were all activated blood-sucking vines with thorns. They were one of the most dangerous mutated plants in the outer islands. Even high-grade professions could be killed by them. The demons hesitated for a moment. But then they launched a crazy attack. At this time, Mordor City could not retreat because the support would arrive soon. If the demons were allowed to go on a rampage, who knew how many innocent people would die in their hands? These demons were here to kill. They came for souls. The quality of the souls of humans in the material plane was good, at least much better than the souls of goblins and kobolds. The souls of goblins and kobolds were the most abundant, and they were the mainstream souls of the dretches in the bottomless abyss. A fierce battle broke out in an instant. In the face of the crazy attacks of the demons, the army of Mordor City stood in front of them without fear because they believed that the reinforcements of the main city would arrive soon. The soldiers of Mordor City fell one after another. The number of demons was also gradually decreasing, but no one retreated from beginning to end. Their sense of belonging and identity to Mordor City was supporting them to continue fighting because this battle was a war to protect their homeland for them. Yes. Defend their home. Mordor City was their home. There were their relatives, their friends, and their wealth and status. The situation is critical. Start the backup plan. Otherwise, it will be difficult for them to hold on until the reinforcements arrive. The voice of the high priest sounded in his mind. The outcome of a high-intensity war could not be decided by one or two legendary professions. The two witches could affect the balance of the battle, but they could not decide the outcome of the battle. Gloria's reply was also very fast. She immediately said, "Agreed. Start the backup plan immediately. The manpower of Mordor City is very precious at present. We can't let the soldiers sacrifice too much. Mother. Establish the space waymark. Start the energy of the elemental furnace. High Priest, please lock the location of the space waymark. I'll open a temporary portal." The cold mechanical voice sounded. This was the Thaling test body number 1 made by Gloria. The short-distance teleportation strike plan is activated. The cross-space strike plan is activated. Begin to assemble the Golem army. Understood. The space waymark is established. The lock is complete. The portal is established. Golems assemble. Begin the teleportation. Steel golems assemble. Begin the teleportation. Diamond golems ready. Begin the teleportation. The mechanical voice of the Thaling test body number 1 sounded. Immediately. In a flattened mountainous area near the battlefield, a portal suddenly appeared out of thin air. Then, stone golems walked out of it, followed by steel golems, followed by diamond golems with legendary level strength. There were about 300 of these golems. They gathered together in silence, and then in the tremor of the earth, they rushed to the demon army in front of them. The power of Mordor City began to show now. While Soren was constantly accumulating strength, Gloria and Fallen which were also accumulating strength. Soren's move was not only for the planning of the island, but also for the future strategic layout. All the flattened mountains here were nodes of the ley lines, which could be transformed into the space waymark of the teleportation circle at any time. P.S. Third update. Please pay attention to Fu2's public WeChat account. Thank you. Chapter 784. The city of Mordor had flattened 27 mountains so far. These mountains were all the nodes of the land veins. Outsiders were a little confused about Soren's actions, and they could not understand why these mountains were flattened there. But the higher-ups of Mordor knew that there were more amazing secrets under these flattened mountains. Under these flattened mountains, the Church of Mordor had been secretly preparing something. The most important thing for Soren in the Avatar crisis was defense. As long as the Avatar crisis was over, he could return to his kingdom. At that time, there would not be many things in the entire multiverse that could threaten him. all the flattened mountains could be transformed into space beacons. Gloria had cultivated her own team within the Witch Council, and the portal could use the power of the elemental furnace. This was tantamount to temporarily replacing the powerful magic lock owned by the Witch Council. When the planning of the entire city of Mordor was completed, Gloria could open the portal to all places on the island of Mordor, and the golem puppets that were currently being prepared could also reach the battlefield as soon as possible. Of course, this was just a simple beginning. Soren's ultimate goal was to complete the interdimensional teleportation strike plan, and the interdimensional teleportation strike plan. Think about it. If there was a huge amount of energy as support, the city of Mordor could open the portal after obtaining a stable transmission beacon, and then directly drop a large group of diamond golems. At that time, even the Church of God would find it difficult to compete with him, right? The Arcane Empire relied on this super-powerful support ability to conquer the Abyss and other lower planes. The Floating City, as the central command system, directly relied on the portal to send the huge golem puppets to the battlefield when the war broke out. The golem factory provided a steady stream of troops, and the lower planes provided enough soul crystals for the Floating City. The entire Floating City was a huge war machine after it was started. If it weren't for such a foundation, the great arcanists would not dare to challenge the gods who had the backing of the kingdom of God. Of course. But all of this required money. Some things could not be done with money, but with enough resources. This was also why the arcanists were obsessed with exploring the sea of the astral world, because the resources of the material plane could not support such a huge consumption. During the Arcane Empire, the lowest level standard for the War of Gods was the Diamond Golem. These were all war machines forged from diamonds. The arcane golems and arcane guards required even more resources. As for the mana engines, they consumed even more energy and materials. When the time comes. Other than discovering the resources of the astral plane and plundering other planes, there was almost no other way to gather so many materials. Of course. Divine kingdoms were similar in this regard. Currently, less than 1/5 of the Queen of Spiders' God Kingdom was created by herself. The other spaces and resources were all split and devoured by the Abyss, or merged with the God Kingdoms of other gods who had been killed. Purely relying on divine power could only be done at the beginning. Otherwise, it would require a huge amount of divine power to fill the hole. A cold mechanical voice sounded. Due to the visit of legendary Golem Master Alice, Gloria had upgraded the intelligence of her Thaling experiment body number 1. It was now moving toward a true Thaling in all aspects, and its own abilities had also been greatly improved. It was now responsible for the central dispatch of the entire battlefield. The Steel Golem army has arrived. Diamond Golems have arrived at the battlefield. Mana transmission. Activating the ability, defense and attack. Activating the battle command. Destroy all the demons. The Golem army has entered the battle state. A red light appeared. All the golems that had been teleported to the battlefield received the battle command. At the same time, they activated the ability they were given and launched an attack on the demons from the scorching hell in front of them. Defense and attack. This was not a very powerful ability. However, this was a combat specialty that was very easy for the golems to master. Their own attributes were quite amazing. Even after a simple modification, the golems still had more than 25 points of strength, and when combined with a simple specialty ability, their combat power would skyrocket. The golems did not feel pain, and injuries would not affect their fighting. Before they were completely destroyed, these golems could fight until they were scrapped. The only drawback was that it was too expensive. Even a golem cost thousands of kindler. And this was the cost price. If it was bought from the Witch Council or the Wizard City, then an ordinary golem would cost nearly 5,000 kindler. Soren's golem army cost more than 3 million kindler. This was simply throwing money at them. But in the current situation, this was the only way. After all, what the outer islands lacked the most was population. The combat power of the militia had not been trained yet, so it was not worth it to completely consume it here. As long as the population was still there, Soren could continue to generate wealth. Moreover, he had the treasure island as a backing. If this island was fully mined, he would probably be able to get about 30 million kindler. If the mining technology was not limited by the era, Soren should be very rich now. At present, Mordor City had tens of thousands of kindlers mineral income every month. A dragon's breath fell from the sky. The pressure of a dragon was also a big burden for the demons. Pure-blooded dragons were always at the top of the pyramid of the multiverse. The pressure from the dragons made the attacks of the demons less fierce. The Wyvern Knights also launched an attack. Although they were few in number, wyverns themselves were dangerous dragon subspecies. There was almost no pressure for them to fight a middle-grade demon alone. Together with the Drow warriors, their combat power was even more amazing. All the Drow warriors selected as knights were high-grade professions. Not only did they have amazing combat power, but most of them were at the level of archers. They had all received the inheritance of the petrified lizard knights in the Underdark. In this respect, they were much stronger than other humans. The situation is stable. The high priest's voice sounded, and he slowly said, "It should be able to last until the reinforcements arrive. But you'd better join the battle. There seem to be some enemies among the demons that are not easy to deal with." Gloria's voice quickly sounded, "Understood. I'll teleport over now. I'll be right there." Fallen Witch's voice also sounded. The radiance of teleportation appeared. Accompanied by the light of greater teleportation, Gloria and Fallen Witch appeared in the sky above the battlefield at the same time. Fallen Witch was still dressed as before, but there were 72 golden tarot cards hovering around Gloria's body. Different from the previous battle, the number of dark golden tarot cards in front of Gloria increased to 9. These 9 dark golden tarot cards were the King, Queen, Champion Knight, Minister, Stars, and so on. Gloria also inherited some knowledge from the Arcane Empire. These 72 tarot cards were the combat version of the Arcane card. Their function was similar to magic scrolls, but they were stored on the card. As for the dark gold cards, they were at least 8th circle spells, and a few of them could even cast legendary spells. War chess game. Arcane cards. Cards of fate. Cards of many things. These things that looked like toys were actually one of the combat props studied during the period of the Arcane Empire. The powerful arcanists had already jumped out of the limitations of magic scrolls and staffs. As long as they wanted to, they could use other methods to create magic devices with even more amazing effects. Compared to the magic scrolls with low effects, Gloria's 72 tarot cards were even more amazing. She almost didn't need to use her spell slots in low-intensity battles. And these tarot cards only temporarily lost their magic power after use. She only needed to go back and recharge them. All the tarot cards were a whole, which was equivalent to refining 72 reusable magic scrolls into a powerful magic device. If it wasn't for the fact that Gloria was still unable to complete the legendary cards of fate, perhaps the power of this set of tarot cards would be comparable to the famous artifacts of the material plane. The mystery of fate was unknown. So far, the 2 witches had not been able to solve the mystery of the card of fate. And this card of fate was originally from the work of a top prophecy great arcanist during the Arcane Empire. Even the gods could not see through the mystery of it. Meteor burst. Sunburst. The 2 legendary witches cast spells at the same time, directly sending the demons from the scorched hell into the abyss of failure. A series of spells emerged, and the large-scale lethal spells brought a devastating blow to the demons. At this time, there was also a sound of rapid marching footsteps in the distance. The 3rd Legion of Mordor near the Demon Valley had arrived at the battlefield. These were not newly trained militia reserves. They were all veterans who had experienced the battles of the Pirate King and the indigenous people. Although the number of wars had decreased after Sauron unified the overseas, the surviving veterans did not disband. They were still the most powerful army overseas. Even to some extent, they were also the top human army in the material plane. These veterans who had been honed in the flames of war had experienced no less battles than the demons of the abyss. The demons have begun to retreat. The voice of the high priest sounded, and he said, there is a legendary Yugoloth demon 1500 meters to the northwest. Let him stay. His soul crystal is very important to our next plan. The lower planes attacked the material plane for souls. But at the same time, their souls after their interplanar invasion were also very important wealth for the spellcasters of the material plane. The lower planes had the most soul crystals in the multiverse, and it was also the easiest place to form soul crystals. They came to plunder to harvest souls. But if they failed and died, the characteristics of the creatures of the lower planes were also very easy to produce soul crystals after death. Golem puppets. One of the most important props in their production was soul crystals. Otherwise, the spellcasters had to reduce their own strength to give them intelligence. The more powerful the golem puppet, the more high-grade soul crystals it needed. Now these high-grade demons who invaded Mordor had all become the prey of the two legendary witches. P.S. Please follow Fuda's public WeChat account. Thank you. Chapter 785. The collapse of the demons had become an unstoppable torrent. Most of the demons from the lower planes were profit-seeking fellows, especially the two kinds of demons, Yugros and night witches, who cared most about their own interests. Now that they had attacked the city of Mordor, not only did they not get enough benefits to harvest the souls of those mortals, but they also suffered heavy losses, and many of their companions had been killed. In this case, they had no will to fight at all. Demons could never be as powerful as demons and devils. Some demons had their foundation destroyed, and it would take many years to recover. They had decided to give up here. Even if they still intended to attack the material plane, there were probably not many who would be willing to invade the island of Mordor. The demons have retreated. Should we block the portal and catch them all? The fallen witch's expression seemed to be eager to try, because after the demons entered the material plane, if they were killed, they might directly drop soul crystals. This was the characteristic of the creatures in the lower planes. Their bodies were originally generated by the distortion of souls. These soul crystals were of great use to the fallen witch, especially recently. She planned to further study the important component of the floating city, the arcane puppet. It was an even more powerful golem puppet that could even cast spells. Other golem puppets, whether they were stone golems, iron golems, or diamond golems, had strong melee abilities. But the arcane puppet was not the same as these golems. They not only had strong melee abilities, but they could also cast some spells, which required even more soul crystals. As for the Thaling puppet and the mana power device, the production conditions were higher than these two. Let them go. If we forcibly close the portal, these demons will probably fight with us to the death, and then the loss will be even greater. The high priest's soft voice sounded, and slowly said, I can feel that the space barrier is getting weaker and weaker. I'm afraid there will be more challenges to face in the future. It's more important to preserve our strength for now. On the other side, Gloria was playing with a fiery red soul crystal in her hand, which came from a legendary level demon. The scorching hell seemed to be a little different, and the energy of the soul crystal was full of burning breath. Perhaps Soren would be interested in it. The scattered evil devils finally escaped back to the interior of the scorched inferno after losing nearly half of their numbers. The battlefield was littered with evil devil corpses. The witches were busy collecting the spoils of war. Mortals could not tell what was the most valuable thing on the demons. The soul crystals needed to be collected together. In the future, the golem army of Mordor City would have to rely on these soul crystals to make. As for the other items, they had to be collected as well. When the time came, they would also have to reward those who fought bravely. The crisis this time was finally over. Although Soren didn't do anything, and he didn't even come back himself, Mordor City, which had been running for a long time, still survived the crisis on its own. The city was no longer Soren's burden. It was now his most important asset. I'll leave the rest to you. The power stored in the shrine has been severely depleted. I must organize a large-scale prayer ceremony as soon as possible to restore the shrine's power. Without the support of the Divine Kingdom, the temple consumed a lot of energy every time it was activated. The high priest now had to continuously preside over large-scale believers' prayer ceremonies in order to collect the power of faith and make up for the huge amount of power that the temple had just consumed. At the same time, in the direction of the distant fog forest, a great battle gradually came to an end. The secondary demon lords from the 27th floor and the 39th floor of the abyss, after leading an army to attack the fog forest for nearly a day without any results, they finally couldn't bear such a huge loss and began to gradually withdraw from the fog forest. Compared to the remote outer islands, the attack on the mainland was more serious because this time there were many demon lords' avatars in many places. Some were famous demon lords, and some were weaker secondary demon lords. Many of their armies had participated in the Abyss Blood War, so their strength was naturally quite powerful. The edge of the fog forest was already full of demon corpses. Compared to the evil devils that invaded Mordor City, the number of demons here had reached more than tens of thousands. But even so, they couldn't shake the fog forest at all. Because what stood in front of them were rows of ancient war trees that had awakened from their slumber. Treants. The children of the oak tree's father. They were awakened by Soren's ritual after sleeping for thousands of years. The ancient war trees, wisdom trees, golden oaks, and ancient treants were like a solid wall, blocking any demons that tried to attack the fog forest. The figures of tree spirits, flower spirits, and water spirits also appeared. These incarnations of nature's spirituality healed the wounds of the ancient trees with spells. The water spirits extinguished the fire that was ignited in the fog forest, and the tree spirits urged animals and plants to form a barrier. As for the little flower spirits, they were responsible for cheering. Awkward, sister. A beautiful tree spirit in a light green dress came to the center of the forest and said to the woman on the altar, "The demon army has retreated. It seems that they have given up on attacking." Kalina's figure was shrouded in an emerald green light. Hearing this, a trace of joy appeared on her tired face, and she murmured, "Finally, they were defeated. This time, thanks to Soren for helping us to hold the ritual successfully." Otherwise, Wang Yao said. Without the divine power of the oak tree's father and these awakened ancient trees, I'm afraid that the fog forest would have turned into a piece of scorched earth. My sisters wouldn't have been able to escape from the demon's clutches. They were tree spirits. They were the beloved children of nature, and their souls were very rare treasures to the demons. Although they were born with the ability to cast spells, they were also limited by their own bodies. That was that they couldn't leave the ancient trees that they resided in for too long. In other words, they couldn't escape from the demon's attack. If they couldn't defend the fog forest, then the demons could just destroy the ancient trees that they resided in to kill them. Then, the souls of these tree spirits would be harvested by the demon lord and turned into his own power or a high-grade succubus. This was definitely not what they wanted. Yes. The beautiful tree spirit nodded in agreement. Then she stuck out her tongue and licked the corner of her mouth, as if she was missing something. "I don't know when he'll come back. I really miss his smell. That wonderful life essence." Speaking of this, the beautiful tree spirit's face was slightly red, and she whispered, "Sister. We gave him that bracelet, but he doesn't seem to use it much. He has only used it once so far. And he even summoned Big Sister over. Should we suggest that he use it a few more times next time? The sisters have injected their own power into this bracelet. We can get replenishment from the ancient trees that we reside in, so we don't have to worry about using up the energy in it. It doesn't matter if he uses it once a day." Karina's pretty face was also slightly red, and then she whispered, "Let's talk to him again next time. For now, let's repair the damage of the forest. The demons have destroyed a lot of trees. We need the help of the tree shepherds to restore the vitality of this forest." The second wave of the Avatar crisis was about to end. Some places had successfully survived this crisis, such as the city of Moder, Arendelle, the Wind Spear Hills, the Misty Forest, the City of Wizards, and so on. However, some places were still caught in a continuous war. North of Autumn Fall. This land across the Agate River was now riddled with holes. Burned villages and camps could be seen everywhere on the plain. The cultivated farmland had been destroyed beyond recognition. The corpses of half-orc warriors and demons were mixed among them. Blood stained the land red, and everything in front of them was so bleak and tragic. An old figure stood on the ground. Eugene was surrounded by countless demon corpses, and there were even many high-grade demons among them. There was even a secondary demon lord from the 127th floor of the abyss that was killed by him. But there was no joy of victory on Eugene's face. There was only sadness on his face. Even this old half-orc, who was fearless even in the face of an ancient dragon, suddenly burst into tears at this moment. He knelt on the dark red land. He let out a roar full of depression and unwillingness. That sound seemed to reach the depths of his soul, and anyone who heard it could not help but feel a trace of sympathy. The half-orcs were done for. It was not easy to pay a painful price to win a piece of land from the hands of the half-elves, and the losses they had suffered were already quite huge. Eugene originally planned to lead the clan to recuperate. As long as they were given 10 years, the power of the half-orcs would grow again. But now everything was over. The second wave of the demons directly dragged the half-orc clan into the abyss of destruction. The two wars had consumed the adult warriors within the clan. Although Eugene led the half-orcs to defeat the demon army with his powerful personal ability, now the adult warriors within the clan were less than 1/3 of the past. The rest were all old, weak, women, and children. They even lost the ability to defend this land. Dead. All dead. Although these half-orc warriors were evil executioners in the eyes of the half-elves, in the face of the demon army, they were warriors who fought to protect their homeland. Their simple minds were full of muscles, but this did not affect them from fighting to the last drop of blood to protect their homeland. The wolf cavalry was wiped out. The Dark Blade and the demon warlock perished together. As the most elite and most powerful seed of the half-orc clan, the half-orc sword saint led his disciples to cover Eugene's surprise attack on the secondary demon lord. He waved his sword with his bare chest and faced a powerful Baylor leader head-on. The orc blade master, who originally had unlimited hope, fell. At the moment of his death, he sacrificed his life to kill a high-grade Baylor. Everything was over. The seed of the half-orc's rise was consumed in this tragic battle. Eugene slowly stood up. His face looked older and older. There was no doubt that this was a worthy opponent. He did not lose to Soren, nor did he lose to the demon army. He just lost to fate. Because even if he was ascendant, Eugene, he could not stop the torrent of history of the Avatar crisis. P.S. Follow Futu's public account on WeChat to give more support. Chapter 786. The orcs were finished. As early as when they attacked the Autumn Leaf Plain, the orcs had suffered a lot of casualties, especially in the battle of besieging the Autumn Falls city. Soren not only descended, but also used the Dragon Covenant to summon the ancient brass dragon. This time, the orcs lost more warriors. The ancient brass dragon directly used dragon breath to plow back and forth on the battlefield several times. There were thousands of people who died on the spot. Later, when they went back to count the casualties, the orcs lost nearly 6,000 adult warriors in the siege. Although this number of casualties was not small, it was still within the acceptable range of a race. The population of the orcs was as many as hundreds of thousands. The half-elves in Autumn Falls City were about 200,000 to 250,000, and the orcs were slightly larger, estimated to reach more than 300,000. Excluding the old, weak, women and children, the ratio of those who could pick up weapons was about 3:1. That was to say, if the orcs were all mobilized, they could make up an army of 100,000 people. 100,000 people. It sounded like a lot, but in fact, this was all the heritage of the orcs. The backward productivity of this era, as well as the form of civilization between agriculture and nomadism, led to the orcs losing too many adult warriors. Even the most basic production and farming could not be maintained. The backward civilization greatly limited the expansion of the population. The orcs' attack on the Autumn Leaf Plain itself meant to cut off all means of retreat. Paying a certain proportion of casualties was still within the acceptable range of Eugene. But all this was just the beginning. After the siege, Eugene once again led the army to meet Soren. This time, the casualties were even more amazing. The army of Mordor was not much different from the battlefield of the orcs, but under the baptism of Mordor's artillery fire, the orcs' loss was very amazing. In the two battles before and after, Eugene lost tens of thousands of people in the hands of Sauron, plus the original loss. It was close to 20 or 30,000 people. This was equivalent to about 1/12 of the total orc population. And these were all adult orc warriors. If it weren't for the two losses, Eugene would not have divided the other side of the Agate River to rest and give Autumnfall City such a long time to breathe. Although these losses hurt the half-beastmen, it did not hurt their foundation. According to Eugene's original plan, he planned to occupy this land and develop agriculture. It was impossible for the orcs to have millions of people like humans and elves by just hunting. Therefore, Eugene was going to rest quietly and use the fertile land of the autumn leaf plains to develop agriculture. As long as there was enough food supply, the size of the half-orcs would increase exponentially. For Eugene, as long as he rested for 10 years, the number of orcs would exceed 1 million. At that time, the tribe's army would be stronger than any human kingdom. However, the Avatar crisis had arrived. The Devil's attack directly destroyed all of Eugene's hopes. A fierce battle directly caused the half-orc clan to lose everything. Only 1/3 of the adult warriors of the half-orc clan remained. 50 to 60,000 casualties meant that almost every family in the clan had lost someone in the battle. With only 30 to 40,000 warriors left, let alone taking down Luoya City, they might not even be able to defend their current land. Moreover, the half-orcs themselves were not good at farming. This attack was based on the accumulation of the past 20 years. The war had already consumed a lot of materials. Now the farmland that Eugene ordered to reclaim in the autumn leaf plains was almost completely destroyed by the war, which meant that they were now forced into a desperate situation with no army and no food. Eugene's face was getting older. After returning to the clan, the first order he issued was to migrate. There was no way to defend this place. The first attack by the devil was likely to happen again. He must preserve the fire of the clan, otherwise, the half-orcs might really disappear in this world. Now the clan could only hide and lick their wounds silently to accumulate strength. As long as they could survive this crisis, then there was still hope for the rise of the half-orcs. The winter of the clan had come. Less than 30 to 40,000 adult half-orcs needed to support more than 200,000 people. Although there were many adult female half-orcs among them, they could also hunt and farm. However, the clan was afraid that it would be a huge burden to just support their children in the future. Their most elite forces had been exhausted. The half-orcs, who only had the old, weak, women and children left in the clan, could become the target of the ogres, gnolls, lizardmen, and even half-elves at any time. Now any war could drag the half-orcs into the abyss of no return. The half-orcs retreated. They paid a huge price to occupy this land. Now they left corpses all over the ground and retreated from the Agate River to the edge of the autumn leaf plains. The half-orcs gave up at least 2/3 of their land. They migrated to the edge, but did not return to the original barren highlands because Eugene could not give up the fertile farmland that was first cultivated. Only these farmlands could ensure that the half-orcs would not starve to death in the next few years. The sky was blood red. A few days after the war, the distant sky seemed to be blood red. The second wave of the Avatar crisis was about to end. Some cities had been completely destroyed, while some places were still safe and sound. Eugene received news from all sides. The news that made him very depressed was that because the half-orcs built their strongholds in the wild, in this wave of demon attacks, most of the abyssal demons who did not want to attack the city actually attacked the half-orcs, and the city of Autumnfall was only attacked by a small group of demons. Nearly 10 cities and hundreds of towns in the material plane were destroyed. This disaster did not only affect humans, but other races such as elves, dwarves, orcs, halflings, lizardmen, gnolls, and so on were also affected. The south of the elven forest turned into a sea of fire. The castle of Black Iron was turned into ruins by a Baelor leader. The Frostblade clan of the orcs was almost wiped out. The only one who suffered less loss in the whole attack was the halflings. Their Lord God fell to the mortal world in advance and repelled the demon army in the form of a saint. Now, the Lord God of the halflings should be the first god to stand in the light. She had shown up. And, this, greater divine power, goddess was in the Shire. The light of dusk shone. Eugene walked tiredly in the reclaimed fields. After a few days, the pain of the clan was healing. No matter what happened, the living always had to work hard for tomorrow. Eugene was very tired during this time. Although most of the clan still supported him, because of this loss, some of the half-orcs had begun to oppose him, thinking that it was he who caused the clan to fall into the current situation. If he did not attack the half-elves, then all of this would not have happened today. Helplessness. These people were originally active in attacking Autumnfall in one breath and completely eliminating the half-elves who occupied the plains. Now, all the blame was put on Eugene. Eugene did not have any explanation for this, and he did not need any explanation. Although he was full of guilt to the clan, most of the half-orcs still respected him and regarded him as the leader of the half-orc clan. Everything had happened. For Eugene, the most important thing was how to get the clan through this difficult time, not find ways to shirk responsibility. Night fell. Eugene's old figure stood up from the field. He clapped his hands and shook off the soil in his palms. Then he walked towards his tent. It was hard for outsiders to imagine that the chief of a race would farm in person, but in fact, the development of the half-orcs from nomadism to farming in the past few decades was completely promoted by Eugene alone. In order to learn the farming skills of humans, it had personally learned from an experienced human farmer as a legendary profession. The farming of the entire clan was taught by him. Eugene taught them how to irrigate, how to arrange ditches, how to sow and harvest, and how to cultivate meticulously. If people did not see all this with their own eyes, it was absolutely impossible to imagine that a peerless powerhouse who could fight against the ancient dragon could teach his people how to cultivate and sow in the field like an old farmer. Eugene was different from all the half-orcs. He, who had traveled the whole continent, firmly believed that only farming could get the half-orcs out of their current predicament, and only farming could make the half-orcs as strong as humans. Attacking the half-elves was just for the land, and choosing the half-elves was only because they were the weakest. The sky was getting darker and darker. Eugene only slept for 3 hours a day, so there was still enough free time for him. He wanted to go out and patrol. However, just as Eugene was about to step out of the tent, he suddenly seemed to notice something. His figure disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he appeared hundreds of meters away. The whole person rose into the air like an eagle. He reached for the spear on his back and approached a mountain in the distance. It sensed a familiar aura. That was the power of the gods. The other party did not seem to have any intention of hiding at all. It was as if he wanted to draw him out. Boom! Eugene's burly figure landed on the ground. In his sight, there was a hazy figure completely shrouded in shadows. Although the two sides had fought near Autumnfall, it was not until today that Eugene really saw the other party's appearance. A young half-elf who was a little too young. In contrast, he had entered his twilight years, and even his life was about to come to an end. What are you here for? Eugene clenched his spear. He was full of fear for the strength of the person in front of him. He did not believe that he would come here without a purpose. The gods were not so bored. Facing Eugene's vigilant look, the half-elf in front of him seemed to smile and slowly said, "Cooperation." Eugene frowned when he heard this. There was a trace of doubt on his face because he felt that it was impossible for him to cooperate with the person in front of him. The half-orcs and half-elves were already blood enemies. The other party was the true god who sheltered the half-elves, and Eugene was the pillar of the half-orcs. It was already very good that the two sides did not immediately fight when they met. There was no possibility of cooperation between them. Make a long story short. Soren looked at Eugene, who was full of vigilance in front of him, and slowly said, "I am very clear about your current predicament. The situation of the half-orcs can be said to be at a dead end. But Mordor City can provide you with a batch of food and supplies. It can also prevent autumn fall from attacking you and give you a precious time to breathe. This batch of supplies should be enough for you to support for a while. I believe that with your ability, there is no problem in protecting the clan safely through this crisis. And there is only one thing I need you to do. That is to help me kill a person. Or it should be said that it is a true god. Eugene was silent for a long time before he said in a deep voice, "Who is it?" A cold smile appeared at the corner of Sauron's mouth, and he slowly said, "Lord of Shadows." Eugene heard this and a sarcastic smile appeared on his face. But before he could speak, Sauron continued, "After this, I will make the decision in the name of the half-elf god, to give you all the land north of the Agate River." Eugene heard this and was instantly moved. P.S. Follow Futu's public account on WeChat to give more support. Chapter 787. How strong was Eugene? This was a question worth thinking about. First of all, Eugene was a rare genius among the orcs. There was no doubt about this. In other words, Eugene was a hero from the start. His basic attributes were far superior to other orcs. It was one of the few wise ones among the half-orcs. Whether it was strength or wisdom, it had no obvious shortcomings. Then, Eugene had traveled the entire continent. It was impossible to calculate how many abilities he gained from this journey, but there was no doubt that this kind of travel made Eugene more dangerous and more powerful than other professions of the same level. Next, Eugene's profession level was around level 26 to 30. If he leveled up in the battle with the Abyss Demons, then his profession level would average around level 28. According to the challenge rating +5 of the leader template, Eugene, as the orc chieftain, could be regarded as a legendary creature close to level 33. In other words, Eugene's challenge rating might be a little higher than the ancient red dragon. The facts prove this point. Eugene had no fear when facing the ancient brass dragon. Even if the ancient brass dragon dared to come underground, Eugene would dare to fight it head-on. Finally, it wasn't the first time Sauron fought with Eugene. Although Sauron had always had the advantage, in fact, Sauron had never fought Eugene head-on from the beginning to the end. All the battles were fought in a guerrilla style, using long attacks to win. Occasionally, he had to transform into a slaughterer to fight head-on. If he didn't transform into slaughter, Sauron would have a hard time taking a direct hit from Eugene. This was because Eugene was a war shaman. His close combat ability was more terrifying than an ordinary legendary warrior. He could also mobilize the power of the orc's ancestral soul. Therefore, Eugene's true strength could be regarded as a war shaman with a challenge rating of 27 or above. He was more dangerous than most demigods. His strength was similar to many weak gods. The facts prove this point. Eugene had no fear in the face of Sauron at this time, but he maintained a vigilant expression. The only ones who could make him show a similar expression were the secondary demon lord and the ancient brass dragon that descended from Fallen Leaf City. Sauron was a true god now. Moreover, he was a true god with lesser divine power. For ordinary legendary professionals, Sauron could completely crush them. Eugene stood in front of him without any fear. Without enough strength, it was impossible to stand in front of him. This was also the reason why Sauron had sought him out. Ascendant, Eugene. The old half-orc in front of him should be the top native profession in the material plane. In terms of combat power, he was probably more powerful than the great chief of the orcs, challenge rating, 24. In history, Eugene was able to slay gods by relying on his own strength. If there were only a few legendary professions in the entire material plane that could help Sauron kill the Shadow Lord, Eugene was undoubtedly one of them. Furthermore, this fellow was the best meat shield in the material plane, capable of healing and tanking. If it weren't for the fact that Eugene was really powerful and Sauron had a use for him, perhaps Sauron wouldn't have contacted him at this time. After all, the half-elves and the half-orcs were now enemies. The continuous wars between the two sides had already become a blood feud. Sauron was the patron of the half-elves. If he contacted Eugene at this time, it would definitely not be good news for the half-elves. As for subduing Eugene or controlling the half-orc tribe, or even cooperating on the surface, Soren almost didn't even think about it. Because if he did this, what would the half-elves who had already settled in Mordor and had their relatives and friends slaughtered by the half-orcs think? Would everyone put down their hatred and live a happy life? That would be too naive. The cooperation with Eugene could only be done in secret. The things that Soren promised could only be done in secret. Otherwise, Soren would hurt the feelings of the half-elves. As a high god, Soren sometimes had to think from the point of view of the believers. The war between the half-elves and the half-orcs had just ended. The hatred could not fade so quickly, and the two sides could not get along well in a short time. Even Soren could only use secret operations to balance all this. As long as these things were not put on the table, there would be no problem. As for after the death of the Shadow Lord, Soren would have taken over the Shadow and Rogue clergy at that time. At that time, the half-elf clergy might be stripped from the main clergy to the secondary clergy. Soren would have fewer things to worry about at that time. The half-elf clergy could not always be Soren's main clergy. In the future, his main clergy would definitely be concentrated on shadow, slaughter, and death. Only with shadow as the main clergy could Soren quickly reach the level of mid-level divine power. No one knew what Soren and Eugene talked about next because at the beginning of the conversation, Soren used his divine power to seal all the surrounding space. About 2 days later, Eugene suddenly gave the order to seal off the forest near the village where the half-orcs were staying. Then he let many adult half-orcs wait outside. After about half an hour, a faint magic light appeared on the ground, followed by a temporary portal. Then, a number of golems and clay golems came out of the portal. These golems were carrying heavy boxes in their hands. Hundreds of golems appeared one after another. After nearly half an hour, a small mountain of materials had been piled up next to the portal. Following that, the golems returned to the portal one after another, and the pitch-black portal gradually closed. At this time, Eugene ordered the half-orcs outside to come in. As soon as they came into the forest, the half-orcs couldn't help but be surprised because they saw bags of food in front of them. All of them were high-quality grains, which were difficult to produce in the barren north. Only the south, where the climate and soil environment were better, could produce them. These grains were better than the ones in autumn-fall because they came from the south coast, which was also very conducive for human farming. In addition, there were many boxes filled with meat. All of them were filled with salted fish, and each fish was marinated. Even if they were stored for a long time, there was no need to worry about them going bad. For the half-orcs who were close to the end of the line, the materials in front of them were simply a life-saving straw. The fire of the demons burned down the village, and naturally destroyed a lot of the granaries. Eugene reached out and tore open one of the grain bags. He picked up a full wheat grain with his fingers and put it in his mouth to chew. Then, like an old human farmer, he nodded and said in a deep voice, "Move it all back. Let people be careful. Don't touch these grains. They are all very good seeds. The tribe still uses the previous rye as the staple food." Eugene was used to a hard life. After seeing these grains, the first thing he thought of was to use them as seeds. It was ridiculous. As one of the most powerful professions in the material plane, Eugene had never married or had children in his life, nor did he enjoy the life of an emperor and a chief. His daily food and drink were not even comparable to ordinary human merchants. Most of the time, he was no different from an ordinary half-orc. When he first took over as the chief of the half-orcs, the entire half-orc clan was in the most difficult period. With the ogres as their enemy and the frost giants eyeing them from behind, the half-orc clan was trapped in the northwest wilderness with nowhere to go. The White Calamity had almost wiped out all the cattle, sheep, and wild boars that the clan had grazed. Although Eugene led the half-orc clan to defeat the ogres with amazing fighting power, he also single-handedly solved the crisis of the frost giant king. But in the end, the dilemma he faced still did not have the slightest chance of turning around. That was the most painful period for Eugene. Although he desperately led the warriors of the clan to hunt in the snow, many of the half-orc clan still starved to death every day in that winter. At that time, he had the strength of a demigod, but there was still no way to save his people. Eugene was just a war shaman. No matter how strong he was, there was no way to make food out of thin air. Even if he desperately hunted and killed for half a month without sleep, he was only one person after all. With his ability, how much prey could he hunt to feed the tens of thousands of hungry people in the clan? In that extremely cold winter, tens of thousands of half-orcs starved to death, and Eugene also deeply realized that the half-orcs must gradually transform from a nomadic civilization to an agricultural civilization. It took Eugene decades to implement all of this. He defeated the ogres in the northwest wilderness and drove the frost giants to the coldest northern mountains. He swept away the threat of the gnolls and forced the lizard men back to the swamp area. Then Eugene began to look for places to cultivate in this barren land. Little by little, he transformed the half-orcs from nomadic fishing and hunting to a semi-agricultural civilization. In the past few decades, the half-orcs had been accumulating strength because compared to humans, elves, and dwarves, the half-orcs were too weak. It was not until Eugene felt that the time was right that he launched an attack on the half-elves. It had to be said. From a bystander's point of view, Eugene was really an indisputable hero of the half-orc race. Although for the half-elves, he was just an evil executioner. A butcher. A homicidal maniac. A demon who invaded their homeland and started a war. The food was transported away bag by bag. Eugene also returned to the tribe. The sudden arrival of supplies made the entire half-orc clan excited. Eugene opened the box, took out a dried salted fish from it, and threw it into the big pot of cooking food. After a while, Eugene reached out and scooped up a bowl of soup and tasted it. He nodded gently, and a smile finally appeared on his old face. He slowly said, "In the future, prepare food according to this quota. Let the people dig more wild vegetables and hunt more prey. When the autumn harvest comes, we don't have to worry about food." Salted fish from Mordor City. Eugene was very satisfied with this because there was a lot of meat in the food provided by Soren. These fish could provide enough nutrition for the warriors, and these salted fish were very good. All of them were real sea salt. This meant that for a long time in the future, the half-orc clan would not have to supplement salt through other means. This was only the first batch of materials provided by Mordor City. According to the conditions promised by Soren, a batch of materials would be sent in the future. Even if they succeeded in killing the Shadow Lord, Mordor City would provide them with a batch of fine weapons forged by military to deal with the future attack of the demons. Sometimes things were like this. Mordor City's warehouse was almost full because of a rich harvest. The salted fish that no one could finish was a rare and precious material for the half-orc clan. They were also the most powerful professions in the material plane. The Princess Royal of Arendelle and Eugene of the half-orc clan were two extremes. If Eugene joined the orc clan, he might be able to live a very luxurious life. But from the moment Eugene decided to carry the responsibility of the entire clan on his shoulders, he was destined to live a very difficult life. This kind of person was a hero. Even among all the races, only the half-orcs thought so. P.S. In the eyes of other races, Eugene was an ambitious war maniac, and he must be carefully guarded against. Everyone should pay attention to Futu's public account. The plot will be intertwined later. If you don't pay attention to it, the plot will be a bit different. Chapter 788. On the Other Side. After Soren made contact with Eugene, he made an oath in the name of the gods, and Eugene made an oath in the name of the ancestors. He also began to arrange other things. The oath of the gods could not be made casually, especially when Soren belonged to the lawful camp. The ancestors of the half-orcs had more restrictions because the half-orcs had no true gods, only heroic spirits. If Eugene violated the oath, he would not be able to become a god again in his life. With this as the foundation of the oath, Soren also summoned the elemental spirits to supervise, forming a real contract with power. It was because of this that Soren could temporarily trust Eugene, and Eugene could also cooperate with Soren. Or else. No one was afraid that the other party would suddenly stab them in the back. However, whether it was Sauron or Eugene, they could be said to be heroes and ambitious figures in the material plane. Sauron was famous for being a man of his word. If he promised something, he would definitely promise it. This had long spread throughout the south coast. The outside world even called him the Pirate Emperor. Eugene himself was also a person who kept his promises. This kind of hero would not casually go back on his words. In order to persuade Eugene to take action, Soren paid a lot of price. What he had to do now was to control Autumn Fall, so that the remaining half-elf army would not attack the half-orcs. Because of the second wave of the demons, the half-orcs had suffered heavy losses. Now the strength of the two sides should be about the same. The half-elf nobles had the idea of recovering the outside land and completely expelling the half-orcs. For this matter, Soren naturally also had arrangements. In fact, when he first moved the civilians of Autumn Fall, the half-elf church that served him had already announced that there would be a huge disaster in the future. Only by going to the overseas city of Mordor could they avoid all this. Now, Soren's prophecy naturally came true without a doubt. The first wave of the demons' attack was very small, and people were just suspicious. However, the scale of the second wave of attacks was very large. Many races were attacked by the creatures of the lower plane. At this moment, the effect of repeating Soren's prophecy was completely different. Almost all the half-elves in Autumn Fall City were suddenly enlightened. They secretly thought that what the true god said was all true. A huge disaster was coming to the material plane. This time, the devil attack was the biggest proof. Luoya City avoided the siege of the demon army because of its strong walls, but this did not mean that there was no loss at all. Demonized ghouls appeared in the city. This was the servant of the demon lord of the bottomless abyss, the king of ghouls. Soren had already mentioned this threat during the second migration, but it was not until the second wave of attack from the demons. The Ghoul King finally made a move on Autumn Fall. Although it didn't destroy the city, it still caused a lot of casualties, causing the residents of the city to panic. At this time, it would be difficult for the nobles to unilaterally recover their lost land. However, in order to make sure that they had no hope of doing so, Soren decided to give them a push personally. After he returned to Mordor City, he ordered the half-elven church to operate and opened a temporary portal to Autumn Fall. Since the energy of the elemental furnace, Mordor City could finally open portals everywhere like the Witch Council. Soren's plan was like this. Send priests back to Autumn Fall and continue to preach that the disaster was not over. The attack of the demons could continue at any time. At present, the most important thing was to save their strength and find a safer place. Then, Soren asked some of the half-elves who had settled in Mordor City to go back and preach, telling others what life was like in Mordor City, how good, how rich, how full of vitality, and how new the city was. Finally, Soren took drastic measures and dug the last batch of half-elven believers who could be taken away to Mordor City. At present, the population of Autumn Fall City has been greatly reduced. Soren had taken away most of the believers in the first 2 times. Now the rest were the hidden believers and pan-believers, and this time he was not even going to let go of this. Faith could be cultivated slowly. As long as these half-elves came to Mordor City, saw everything in Mordor City, and enjoyed the benefits of Mordor City, they could integrate into Mordor City little by little in their daily lives, and naturally, they could slowly cultivate into pan-believers. After a long time, pan-believers could also become more devout believers, and for Soren, it was also a labor force for Mordor City. This matter was handed over to God's chosen, Milan, and the original archbishop of the half-elven church. The former grew up in Autumn Fall, and Soren also came to her and helped Autumn Fall solve the crisis. Therefore, she should be the most suitable candidate. For Soren, this was also an opportunity to gain experience and cultivate fanatics. Milan was only a 16-year-old girl. Although she had Soren's gift, her strength had improved rapidly, and she was now a high-grade priest. But after all, she was still too young. This kind of person who was destined to be in charge of the half-elven church in the future must have a little more experience. After Soren's series of moves, the last trace of vitality in Autumn Fall City was basically squeezed out by him. Mordor City, Beach. The second impact of the Avatar crisis had ended. Without Soren's help, Mordor City was safe and sound. Although they suffered a lot of casualties in this battle, they also gained a lot of spoils from the lower planes, especially a large number of soul crystals, which was enough for the golem factory in Mordor City to operate at full power for a while. Golems were combat power and important labor force. As long as there were energy resources, they could work like the heavy mechanical engineering corps in the interstellar era. Very few people were close to this beach, because it was occupied by a fierce guy. He was the pirate leader of Mordor City, and the pirate leader who was close to legendary strength, Giant. All pirate leaders would manage an area, but Giant was the most idle one among them. Because his brain wasn't very good. People had shortcomings and strengths. Giant's brain wasn't good, but he was loyal enough. In his view, as long as he faithfully carried out the orders of Sir Soren, his status would not be less than other pirate leaders, and he would even stand higher than them. It didn't matter if his brain wasn't good. Giant had strength, but he was a stubborn guy. In this way, most of Giant's affairs were handed over to his deputy, and he himself was trying to improve his strength every day. Because Soren said that he was the most likely warrior to reach the legendary realm in the near future. Giant fought countless battles in his life. The Battle of the Pirate King, the Battle of the Totem Jin, the Expedition of the Indigenous People, the Battle of the Vrykul Pirates, the Battle of the Southern Principality, the Expedition to Autumn Fall City, the First Demon Attack, the Second Demon Attack. Every single one of these giants had participated in the battle, and they had all survived. Except for the Battle of the Dragon Slayer, when he didn't follow Soren, he was basically in all the big and small battles. He also rose from a mid-grade warrior all the way to the quasi-legendary realm. Giant had an innate racial bonus, and his body had the blood of the Swamp Giant. Note, the Swamp Giant is a branch of the Tidal Giant. Since Sir Soren said that he was the most likely to break through the legendary realm, then Giant thought that he would definitely be able to break through because Soren was always right. If Sir Soren said that he could break through, then he would definitely be able to break through. Therefore, Giant was desperately training himself every day, squeezing his own potential. He didn't have as many things as the other pirate leaders, so it was easier for him to focus. In contrast, the half-elf first mate hadn't had a breakthrough for a long time. At this time, the giant was swinging his weapon against the surging tidal force of the sea. His weapon was a heavy steel +3 anchor. Every time he swung it, he would break through the waves and make a loud rumbling sound. This practice method was taught to him by Sir Soren himself. Although it was very difficult, the giant still persevered in it. Because Sir Soren said that this was a very powerful exercise method. If he could succeed, his future combat power would be very amazing. Then, the upright giant practiced against the tides of the sea every day, swinging tens of thousands of times a day. If it wasn't for the giant's blood, he would have collapsed long ago. Because the tidal force of the city of Mordor was very powerful, ordinary warriors might not even be able to stand under the tides, let alone swinging the waves. The giant's weapon weighed more than 800 pounds, which was more than 700 pounds. He was the only one in the city of Mordor who could swing such a heavy anchor. As for swinging the waves tens of thousands of times a day, I'm afraid it was simply unimaginable in the eyes of others. A few months passed. At the end of the second impact, the giant suddenly felt that his blood was restless. When he swung his arms against the tide, there was a surge of power all over his body. His heart was galloping, and the power of his blood seemed to be awakened. He was already very familiar with every surge of the tide. It was as if his spirit had integrated into the tide, and his movements were also integrated into some kind of wonderful law. The power of the sea seemed to be integrated into it. In an instant, as if he had broken through a critical point, Giant's body made a crackling sound, and then his body grew a lot taller. When he swung the ship towards the waves. Boom! As if it had exploded, the huge tide in front of him was directly split into two halves by him. At the same time, on the route of the giant's swing, another wave was strangely formed. It pushed forward for hundreds of meters before gradually dissipating. Success. Breakthrough. At this moment, Giant felt that there was endless energy in his body. He felt that everything in front of him was different. A door to a new world had opened to him. He had finally advanced into the legendary realm. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to a genuine subscription. Chapter 789. Roar. A roar instantly spread throughout the city of Mordor. Both Gloria and the high priest were alarmed by this roar. The figure of the high priest appeared above the temple. She looked at the beach in the distance and said slowly, "It seems that the giant has broken through to the legendary realm. Although he is a little stupid, his talent is not bad. He should be a very important force in the city of Mordor in the future." Gloria's figure also appeared, and after taking a look, she said, "Not bad, not bad. The city of Mordor has finally begun to give birth to its own legendary profession. According to the current progress, it is only a matter of time before Saruman enters the legendary realm. The little girl named Milan in the church has Soren's gift, so it will not be difficult for her to enter the legendary realm. I heard that Scarface, Cyclops, and Adele Isabella are also on the verge of entering the legendary realm. Although it may take a little longer, there should be many legendary professions in the city of Mordor in the future. Good preparation. It was finally time for Soren to reap the rewards of everything he had paid in the beginning. The pirate leaders with potential had touched the edge of the legendary realm, and the ones without potential had reached the ranks of high-grade professions. Now the city of Mordor was at a critical point. As long as it broke through this critical point, the number of legendary professions in the city of Mordor would not be much less than other old forces. And these legends were all people who followed Soren from the beginning. Their loyalty was far higher than others. In the future, these people would be important pillars of the city of Mordor. The high-end combat power of the city of Mordor was now very strong. Soren was a true god, lesser divine power, Vivian was the son of Fear, demigod, Gloria and Fallen, which were legendary wizards, the high priest was a level 30 psionic warlock, cursed state, and Saruman was divinity. In addition, the city of Mordor also had an adult shadow dragon, a divine wyvern raised by Vivian, and the giant who had just entered the legendary realm. Such strength was already stronger than many human kingdoms. Eastern Kingdom. In the northwest of this faraway country, there was a towering mountain that reached into the clouds. This mountain peak was like a sharp sword piercing through the clouds. The surrounding cliffs were very steep. Even high-level monks would find it difficult to climb to the top with their bare hands. There was a platform at the top of the mountain. It looked very strange, as if someone had flattened it with their bare hands. At the most important part of the platform, there was a strange stone. The rock wasn't big. It looked a bit like a human stone statue. Its facial features were blurred, but its body shape looked like a monk sitting cross-legged. No one knew how long this stone had been here. No matter how many years it had been battered by wind and rain, it had not moved in the slightest. A cold gust of wind blew. Suddenly, at the bottom of the mountain, several figures were rapidly ascending. They were all dressed as martial monks and used a very mysterious light body technique. One leap was more than 10 meters away, continuously advancing towards the top of the mountain. Very soon, 5 figures came to the top of the mountain. One of them was a pretty girl. She was Cicada, who had signed a contract with the demon Sauron. She had successfully entered the inner circle of martial monks and began to cultivate at the top level. Grand Master. The leading middle-aged martial monk knelt down respectfully towards the stone in front of him. The other martial monks saw this and knelt down one after another. The girl Cicada's expression was a bit blank, but she quickly knelt down as well. The leading legendary martial monk respectfully said to the stone, "Grand Master. The ancient evil creature has broken the seal and has come out. The monastery is worried that the people of the Eastern Kingdom will be plunged into misery and suffering, so they specially sent their disciple Hollow to ask the Grand Master to come out." "Grandmaster, please subdue the ancient evil creature for the sake of the world. Otherwise, I'm afraid the Eastern Kingdom will be flooded with blood." The stone was still motionless in the same place. Except for the legendary monk who was the leader, the other monks all looked at him with a puzzled expression. Today, they had received a mission from the monastery to respectfully request a grandmaster who had been in seclusion for a long time to come out and deal with an ancient evil creature. As for this strange mountain, it was the first time for these young martial monks to come here. They didn't understand why the legendary Master Hollow was so respectful to this stone. Because no matter how they looked at it, it was just an ordinary stone. There was no breath of life on it. Time passed little by little. Just as the others were getting more and more confused, suddenly a breath of life came from the cold stone in front of them. Then there was a very slow breathing sound. A normal person's breathing should be relatively fast, but the breathing in front of them was slow to the degree of 1 breath per minute. All the people present were high-grade professionals. This breath of life and this slow breathing were absolutely not there at the beginning. All of this was completely sudden. As if thinking of something, one of the martial monks couldn't help but be shocked. "Cloud Monk. The Grandmaster that the monastery wants us to welcome is the legendary Cloud Monk?" Hearing this, the others were also shocked. The girl Cicada also couldn't help but be surprised and looked at the stone in front of her with surprise. Cloud Monk. It was one of the most peculiar branches of martial monks. They were very powerful martial monks and had all kinds of strange abilities. When they cultivated to a certain level, they could snow treading without trace, cloud walking, and in the end, they could even obtain the immortal mountain ability. At that time, the cloud climbing monk would remove the limit of their lifespan and would never die because of old age. Crack. A crack appeared on the stone in front of them, and then the whole stone turned into powder and scattered. An old martial monk sitting cross-legged appeared in front of everyone. Neither old nor dead. Neither eating nor drinking. He didn't even need to breathe. At this moment, all the martial monks couldn't help but show an expression of disbelief. Because as martial monks, they knew too well that the Grandmaster in front of them showed unimaginable strength when he came out of seclusion. It wasn't such a thrilling scene. But those who understood the meaning of this were absolutely unbelievable. This martial ancestor chose to go into seclusion at the peak of this mountain. It was unknown how long this seclusion lasted. The stone that wrapped him inside was completely formed by wind, frost, and dust. And this process might take as long as several hundred years or even 1,000 years. Neither old nor dead. Neither eating nor drinking. He didn't even need to breathe. The cloud monk in front of them had entered a realm that they couldn't imagine. Such an existence was completely comparable to any god. The martial monk in front of them was an existence that they couldn't understand. At least, none of the known martial monks in the monastery could touch such a mysterious and profound realm. Immortal mountain. Divine transcendence. Unbreakable Vajra. Immortal body. The abilities that could only be obtained by martial monks in the legendary realm appeared in the minds of the others. They didn't even know how many legendary abilities the cloud monk in front of them had. They could only be sure that such an existence was almost like a god to them. How many years is it now? The cloud monk with a slightly old face slowly opened his eyes. His voice was a little hoarse. He hadn't spoken for hundreds or even thousands of years, so he probably wasn't used to it. He should have cultivated the immortal body of a martial monk very late, so his appearance was fixed at the moment he succeeded. This didn't affect his strength. When a martial monk reached this realm, they probably didn't care about their appearance. It's the year 1676 of the New Moon era. The leading legendary martial monk named Hollow bowed his head respectfully. His voice was slightly trembling, and he seemed to be a little excited as he said, "Grandmaster has been in seclusion for 632 years. At this moment, Hollow finally understood why the monastery sent him to welcome this Grandmaster. It was because after entering the legendary realm, he gradually lost his direction. He didn't know what realm he could reach in the future. But today, when he saw the cloud monk, he deeply realized how small he was. He also understood that his current legendary realm was nothing compared to the martial monk's cultivation. There were too many paths waiting for him to explore in the future. It's been more than 600 years. There seemed to be a hint of vicissitudes in the voice of the cloud monk. He slowly stood up and directly stepped out of the cliff. Just like that, he walked in the air, and the white clouds seemed to be under his feet. Every step he took brought him over 100 meters away. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. Only a sentence was left behind on the spot, since the ancient evil creature has been born. I'll go now. You guys go back to the monastery first. I'll visit the current head of the monastery after some time. P.S. Search for the official account of the Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to a genuine subscription. Chapter 790. The group of monks watched as the cloud monk left. The other monks all had expressions of reverence, but the young girl's expression was a bit strange. She could be considered one of the most powerful mortals in the material plane. This was because her master, Soren, was a true god. It was different from the feeling Soren gave her. The cloud monk in front of her was powerful, but the aura he gave off was like that of a rock. The young girl couldn't even sense any fluctuations in his emotions. She didn't know how long this person had lived. His body was immortal, but his spirit was no different from a rock. Yes. He was just a rock. The young girl immediately understood why she had such a feeling. The cloud monk who had just left should be one of the most powerful mortals in the material plane. It could be said that this person's strength was immeasurable. Fighting against normal gods was nothing, and he might even be able to take on the god kingdom of a weak god. This kind of existence already had an immortal body, but he wasn't a real god spirit. The girl could feel that his mind was full of dust, just like the stone he had turned into. Hundreds and thousands of years of life had made his mind not as pure as it was before. And this was the biggest difference between the cloud-climbing monk and the gods. Unless he broke through another realm and reached the unimaginable realm of oneness of heaven and men, such a person was really not much different from a stone. However, if he truly reached the realm of being one with the world, wouldn't he be walking the same path as the oak tree father? True gods were immortal. Whether it was the body or the spirit, true gods were immortal. However, the cloud monk was different. Only his body was immortal, but his spirit hadn't reached the realm of being immortal. If his spirit could reach the realm of being immortal, then he would truly be one with the world, and the realm of the true mysteries of the way of nature. This kind of monk had never appeared before. If he really reached such a realm, wouldn't he be similar to an ancient god? They didn't need faith. But he had the ability to rival any great divine power, gods. Witnessing the birth of such a powerful martial monk with their own eyes, everyone present was touched and had a different kind of understanding. This was also the monastery's arrangement. These people who welcomed the cloud monk out of seclusion were all the most promising seeds in the monastery. Among these people, because they had a contract with Soren, they were connected to the gods. Among them, the girl should be the one who had the deepest understanding. Her understanding and feelings might have far surpassed that of the legendary monk. Let's go down too. Sue stood there for a long time before he came back to his senses. Everything that had happened today had left him in a state of shock. Seeing that many people still hadn't come back to their senses, he couldn't help but say, "Since Grandmaster has already come out of seclusion, why don't you come out? If that's the case, then there shouldn't be a problem for the ancient evil being to break through the seal. You should know that Grandmaster is someone who broke through over 100 levels of the bottomless abyss. Back then, Grandmaster went deep into the bottomless abyss with a team of legendary figures, and even fought with the demon prince back then. If he personally makes a move, even the legendary 100-armed giant can fight head-on." Hearing Void's words, the others could not help but be speechless. One of them suddenly said, "Master Su. I want to ask, how old is this Grandmaster now? When was he born?" Su was stunned for a moment. Then, he thought for a long time before slowly saying, "I'm not very clear about Grandmaster's matters. There are very few records in the monastery. We can only confirm that Grandmaster lived through the Arcane Empire. When the Arcane Empire fell, Grandmaster was one of the saints in charge of sealing the ancient evil being in the Eastern Kingdom. Saint. This title was not only used for gods. For the Cloud Monk just now, calling him a saint was not an exaggeration at all. Is that so? The girl murmured, then what about the other saints? Sue turned to look at her and hesitated for a moment before saying, most of them have died of old age. After all, gods are the true immortals. One of them went to Sigil City, but there is still no news. Another arcanist went to the Clockwork Nirvana's mechanical mirror. Perhaps he is still alive. This period of history is still preserved in the monastery's ancient inscriptions. When you reach the legendary realm, you will have the right to go in and take a look. Hearing this, the young girl fell silent. She felt that when she reached the legendary realm, it was absolutely necessary to go to the monastery to see the legends of the past. It was a glorious and tragic era. It was also an era when mortals and gods collided head-on. No one knew the reason for the destruction of the Arcane Empire, but many stories passed down had traces of gods. Droll hated the alchemy technology of the Arcane Empire so much. It might have something to do with the fall of Father of the Oak Tree. As mentioned before, Droll hated the alchemy technology of the Arcane Empire very much, because it was these things that polluted the whole nature and led to the sacrifice of Father of the Oak Tree to save the world. A group of people went down the mountain silently. The girl felt that today's trip was really worth it, because after witnessing all this with her own eyes, she suddenly had a feeling that the legendary realm was in front of her, and she was about to reach out and touch it. The quasi-legendary realm. This wonderful feeling made her want to go back and start a new practice immediately, because she felt that the divine transcendence was waving to her again. The Avatar crisis was coming. Soren changed some things, but he couldn't change some things. Some demons and devils in the lower planes suffered heavy losses, but some demons and devils in the lower planes also gained a lot. The greedy ones would surely launch another attack, but the next time, they would avoid some tough bones. To these demons of the lower planes, the material plane was a rich treasure trove. They just needed to go in and plunder. The gods didn't intervene too much in the second wave of impact, because when they just fell to the mortal world, their divine power had been stripped away. At this weakest time, they didn't want to expose themselves. However, with the passage of time, the gods began to quietly accumulate a little divine power, and they were out of the weakest stage. At this time, the gods began to gradually step onto the stage of the Avatar crisis. This also meant that the impact in the future would be more and more terrible. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to a genuine subscription. Chapter 791. After dealing with many things, Soren was also ready to leave for Arendelle. To deal with the Shadow Lord, he had to rely on the power of the Princess Royal. Soren had always suspected that the Princess Royal had inherited the bloodline of the goddess of north wind and snow, but there was no definite news to confirm this. The Cold Winter Maiden had not yet appeared. When the Princess Royal was really in danger, it was already in the middle and later stages of the Avatar crisis. Soren pulled the Princess Royal into the same line at this time, which was good for both of them, because the Princess Royal was also constantly improving herself in the battle with other gods. Speaking of which, the reason why Soren suddenly decided to attack the Shadow Lord was because of something else. Back to a few days ago, Soren went to explore the kingdom of the god of the hunt, Malor. This was a very rewarding adventure. Soren not only gained a lot of divinity and divine power, but also accumulated more than 2 million slaughter EXP. Originally, he planned to leave after exploring a part of it, because the second wave of the Avatar crisis was about to begin. But after all, he was still reluctant to give up such a rich reward. The kingdom of the god of the hunt was collapsing rapidly. If he went out like this, the next time he came, it would be destroyed. So, in the end, he decided to walk around with the incarnation of the Silver Moon Lady. Not to mention other gains, just the slaughter EXP and divinity were worth spending some time here. And a lot of arrangements had been made in the city of Mordor. Even if Soren was not there, they should be able to get through this crisis safely. This delayed them for more than a day. Then both of them gained something, but at that time, the kingdom of the god of the hunt had shrunk too much. Without the support of divine power, the kingdom was on the verge of accelerating collapse, and they felt that it was impossible to get anything more. Soren and the Silvermoon Lady returned to the material plane together. That was when it happened. Just as Soren and the Silvermoon Lady left together and returned to the material plane through the barrier of the god's kingdom, they suddenly felt that they were surrounded by a force, and the nearby space was completely isolated. Be careful. Be careful. Lady Silvermoon and Soren spoke at the same time. Immediately, Soren's eyes glowed with the light of divinity. He then activated his tracking divinity, and everything around him was within the range of his divine senses. There didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. But this was the strangest part. Even with Soren's intuition, he couldn't detect any traces of abnormalities. This could only mean one thing, and that was that these traces had been erased by a very powerful person. And to be able to do this, perhaps only legendary rogues and rangers could do it. These erased traces itself was an anomaly, so Soren did not hesitate to activate his tracking clergy. In an instant, some scenes appeared in his mind. Ah! There was a cry of despair as a half-elf adventurer was stabbed to death by a dagger that appeared out of nowhere. The corpse was about 5 meters away from Soren, but there was nothing there. At the other side, an orc shaman's throat was cruelly cut, and the corpse was about 7 meters away from Soren. Then 3 meters to the side, an elf droll's heart was directly pierced by a dagger, and he couldn't react in time. Death replay. This was the ability of Soren's clergy. The power of the tracking clergy combined with the domain of death to create a replay of the moment of death. Almost all of them were killed in one hit. Before Soren came out, many adventurers had already died here. All of them were top-tier assassins, and many of them couldn't react in time. Someone is ambushing here. High-tier legendary assassin. Assassin. Has the ability to completely hide. Doesn't reveal himself when attacking. Shit. It's the Shadow Lord's favored one. The target is me? Soren's reaction and reasoning were undoubtedly top-notch. Just by looking at these incomplete scenes, he immediately deduced the general situation. Assassin. A follower of the Shadow Lord. They would never reveal themselves when attacking in stealth, so Soren couldn't see any of the enemy's figures. This was because the divine power from the Shadow Lord gave them the ability of permanent invisibility. Damn it. In the entire multiverse, only the Shadow Lord, who was in charge of the Shadow clergy, could cultivate such a follower. His target was definitely not the Lady of Silvermoon next to him, so the only explanation was that he wanted to kill Soren. Soren was the god of half-elves and rogues, and he also had the Shadow domain, so he was the most dangerous competitor of the Shadow Lord. Soren killed the god of the hunt, Malor. So when the god of the hunt's kingdom fell into the mortal world, Soren was most likely to go there. The other party was ambushing at the entrance of the god's kingdom, so it was obvious that he wanted to kill Soren. Now, the most dangerous and difficult thing to determine was whether the Shadow Lord came in person. Gods were very afraid of death. The Shadow Lord might not dare to come in person to kill Soren, because the Lady of Night wanted to get the Shadow clergy for a long time. She had always been a very cautious god. There was a faint sound. Just when Soren and the Lady of Silvermoon found that the space around them was sealed, and they couldn't use teleportation spells at all, there was an almost inaudible movement from all directions. It was as if a gentle breeze had brushed past. Assassin. The Lady of Silvermoon frowned and said slowly, "This is the Shadow Lord's follower. I didn't expect him to be ready to attack you so soon." In order to return Soren a favor, the Lady of Silvermoon warned Soren. The Shadow Lord wanted to kill Soren. If Soren came out alone, then the situation would be slightly more dangerous. But fortunately, he came out with the Lady of Silvermoon today, and these assassins obviously didn't recognize the avatar of the Lady of Silvermoon. They regarded her as a companion of Soren, and a very dangerous legendary spellcaster. Then, logically speaking, once the battle began, the assassins would have to eliminate the most dangerous spellcaster first. This was the law for thousands of years. Countless assassins used bloody lessons to warn the future generations that if the spellcasters were left alone, there would be many tragic consequences. Therefore, at the moment when the battle broke out, the Lady of Silvermoon became the first target of these assassins. On the contrary, Soren only faced 2 or 3 enemies. P.S. Search for the official account of the Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to subscribing to it. Chapter 792. At this moment, Lady Silvermoon was a little confused. It was clear that the Lord of Shadows was targeting Soren, but for some reason, she became the primary target of the assassins at the beginning of the battle, and most of the enemies were coming for her. How could it be like this? At this moment, Lady Silvermoon's heart collapsed. After all, she was only an avatar that came here. The battle in the Divine Kingdom had already consumed a lot of power, and now she was besieged by a group of legendary assassins. The situation suddenly became a little dangerous. The Lord of Shadows had a group of the best legendary assassins in the multiverse, and many of them were given a trace of divinity by the Lord of Shadows. For such an old god, perhaps the divinity was very rare, but 1 or 2 points of divinity was not difficult to obtain. This group of assassins could even threaten a true god in the form of a saint. The power of the divinity, space change. In the face of the enemy's crazy attack, Soren could not sit still at this time. These enemies had blocked the teleportation in advance, and only by relying on the power of the divinity could the seal be broken temporarily. Soren was not worried. After all, his close combat ability was still very strong, but he was not sure about Lady Silvermoon. If the teleportation spell could not be used, she might fall here. If the avatar died, Lady Silvermoon's body would also be seriously damaged, which was not something he wanted to see. An invisible force collided. There was a slight distortion in the surrounding space, and Soren's face showed a trace of shock. He failed. He did not break the dimensional lock. There was a trace of power from the shadow plane here. Greater energy shield. Lady Silvermoon was also an old god. The moment she was attacked, she activated an energy shield, and then took out a heavy hammer. It was her exclusive artifact, the Staff of the Waning Moon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Although Soren could not see the figures of the enemies, he could lock the position of these enemies by relying on his tracking clergy. Assassins had the ability of permanent invisibility, which was also very dangerous for other legendary figures. However, for Soren, who had the divine domain of tracking, it was not a problem at all. As long as he could find a trace, he would be able to lock onto his target. This was also the reason why the Shadow King did not dare to personally deal with Soren, and even until now, there was no trace of him. If the Lord of Shadows appeared, Soren could instantly use his tracking divinity to lock onto him. Shadow Hide. Shadow Strike. Transform into slaughter. There were 7 legendary assassins who had attacked the 2 of them. One of them was a sorcerer who had the ability to cast shadow spells. They summoned distorted shadowy creatures and surrounded Soren and the Lady of Silvermoon. At this point, Soren could no longer conserve his strength. After all, this was a legendary-level assassination squad. He immediately transformed into his slaughter form and pounced towards the nearest enemy who was completely invisible. Divine Shockwave. A divine power emerged. There was a slight distortion in the light ahead. That was because the enemy had been sent flying by the divine power shockwave. Order, death. Soren did not dare to be careless. He seized an opportunity to kill an enemy first. He had a rich source of divine power, and the city of Mordor could continuously provide him with it. Therefore, there was no need to reserve the divine power harvested from the kingdom of God at this critical moment. Power of divinity, time stop. 3 assassins appeared around the Lady of Silvermoon's body, and her high-grade energy shield was broken almost instantly. In this case, she could no longer retain her divine power. She directly used the power of divinity to activate, time stop, and then swung out a heavy hammer. Blood splattered. However, the bodies did not appear. Even if death came, these assassins were still invisible. There's a shadow wizard on the left. Leave the rest to me. A blood-red glow appeared in Soren's pupils. With the growth of the power of the gods, especially after obtaining the domain of slaughter and death, Soren's mastery of the slaughter form became stronger and stronger, and the effect on himself became smaller and smaller. If he could master the domain of slaughter, he was afraid that he could completely get rid of the negative status of the slaughter form. Die. The power of the domain of tracking was fully exerted. In Soren's eyes, these completely invisible enemies had nowhere to hide. Their ability to not be visible in their attacks was very dangerous for others, but it was completely useless for Soren. The slaughter form gave Soren a strong vitality. He no longer had to worry about being killed by these legendary assassins with a backstab, and naturally, he could close the distance and fight hand to hand. Shadow leap. The space seal seemed to only target Soren and the Lady of Silvermoon. These assassins could still use the shadow ability to travel. An assassin suddenly appeared behind Soren and seemed to be ready to backstab him. Intuition dodge. In the face of the enemy's attack, Soren did not react at all. He did not even look back at all. Just at the moment when the enemy approached, he suddenly held the curved sword with both hands and stabbed backward, and then a stream of blood gushed out. In the entire material plane, there were not many people who could dodge better than Soren. These assassins actually wanted to backstab Soren. They were simply courting death. Backstab, pincer attack, shadow strike. All the assassins' sneak attacks were completely ineffective against Soren. It was as if he had a third eye and could easily predict any sneak attack. Stupid. Soren's mouth showed a cruel smile. In an instant, he rushed forward and stabbed the curved sword into a cloud of air. When he pulled it out, a stream of blood gushed out. He was the god of rogues and half-elves. Looking at the whole multiverse, who could know the ability of rogues better than the god of rogues? If these assassins attacked head-on, Soren might be in a bit of danger, but they actually foolishly chose to assassinate him. This was simply suicide. How could the god of rogues die under the assassination of a group of assassins who advanced from rogues? They were simply showing off in front of an expert. Shadow hide. Soren's figure disappeared in place. He felt that as the god of rogues, he should tell these naive guys what the real art of assassination was. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to a genuine subscription. Chapter 793. It was time to show off his real skills. Soren's figure disappeared. Shadow dancers, evade sight, allowed him to enter stealth mode at any time, and the anti-detection cloak made it impossible for these assassins to capture his specific location. On the contrary, in front of Soren, who had tracking, these assassins who had launched attacks had nowhere to hide. One by one, they were all locked onto by Soren. Although the ability of Shadow Jump was sealed, for Soren, it was enough to kill these enemies without using Shadow Jump. Backstab. A cold light suddenly appeared, and the next moment, blood splattered. These assassins did not break the stealth state until they were killed by Soren. It seemed that the Shadow Lord had given some kind of ability to their bloodline. A magnificent counterattack was about to begin. As the top rogue in the material plane, Soren was very familiar with the characteristics of this profession. These assassins were simply showing off in front of an expert. He did not know how many rogues he had fought in the past, and he was already very familiar with the assassin's attack methods. Hold human body spell. Lady Silvermoon seemed to be angered by the sudden attack, especially since the enemy's main target was her. After the goddess got angry, she started to cast human immobilization. Her spellcasting level was frighteningly high. Basically, as long as she caught the target, she would be able to cast a spell. Furthermore, the duration of Lady Silvermoon's spells was frighteningly long. As long as these assassins were held in place, they would basically stand there and wait for death. During this time, a child could stab them to death with a dagger. Retreat. After paying for nearly half of the casualties, the assassins finally couldn't take it anymore. They came with the belief that they would die, but until now, neither Lady Silvermoon nor Soren had been injured at all. If they continued to fight, they would be courting death. They finally gave up this assassination operation and prepared to withdraw from the battlefield. Want to leave? Lady Silvermoon's expression was quite cold. She raised her hand and cast stone to mud. Immediately, messy footprints appeared on the ground. These assassins were very powerful, but after all, they had not reached the realm of leaving no trace in the snow. Their path of retreat had turned into mud, and light footprints immediately appeared. Silver blade of Gith. Change form. A silver ray of light appeared in Soren's palm, and it turned into a silver bow that was emitting a strange light. Divine power infusion. Sob. Sob. Arrows were shot out like a storm. Soren directly used his divine power to form arrows, completely saving the time of putting arrows on the bow. It was like an anti-aircraft machine gun shooting out arrows that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. He had already considered this method of battle. The effect was even more powerful than Missile Storm. The downside was that it consumed a lot of divine power. One arrow cost 1 divine power. Poochie. Thump, thump. Continuous sounds of people falling to the ground rang out, and blood splattered in the air. Soren turned his palm, and the battle bow of Gith turned back into a silver-white metal ball, and then disappeared into the Battlemaster gloves. At present, this weapon was not complete. Although Gloria had completed some of its abilities, it was not enough to be used as Soren's main weapon until it reached the level of divine weapon. If he wanted to exert its real combat power, he was afraid that only the fragments of the divine weapon could be used to repair the silver blade of Gith. The Northern Witch Council had such a peace, but the Eye of the North would not give it up so easily. Soren needed 2 divine weapons. A main weapon and an offhand weapon. Divine power infusion completed the embryo of the main weapon, but the silver blade of Gith as an offhand weapon was still too far away. You actually have such a thing? Lady Silvermoon looked at the silver-white metal ball in Soren's palm with surprise and said slowly, Silver blade of Gith? This thing is a little hot. Soren smiled and did not answer at all. He was not afraid of the Gith Yankees now. The Avatar crisis had broken out, and the Gith Yankees were probably worried about some astral world beasts. How could they have the leisure to find trouble with him? Let's go. The Shadow Lord is not here. I'm afraid he doesn't dare to show up easily, because my old enemy also wants his priesthood. Lady Silvermoon's face did not look very good when she said this. She and the Lady of the Night had been fighting for thousands of years, and she had always been at a disadvantage. She naturally felt uncomfortable when she mentioned her old enemy. The Lady of the Night could be said to be the 3 giants of the gods of the evil alignment. One was the Queen of Spiders, one was the Storm Lord, and the other was the Lady of the Night. In the past, the Massacre God system was in the axis of the evil alignment, but with the seal of the God of Murder and the half-dead Dread Lord, there were only these 3 gods in the evil alignment. Let's go. Having just encountered an assassination, Soren's face did not look very good. There was no way he could get along with the Shadow Lord. If the Shadow Lord wanted to level up, he had to obtain the priesthood of Wanderer. If Soren wanted to climb up, he could not avoid the priesthood of Shadow. Both sides were destined to fight to their heart's content. But he did not expect the Shadow Lord to make his move so quickly. I'm afraid. Following this, the churches and forces of both sides would inevitably clash. Soren had never been a person who would sit still and wait for death. Since both sides were destined to be enemies. Then he had to plan how to deal with the Shadow Lord. Mid-level divine power. He was a very, very dangerous enemy. It would be very difficult for Soren to kill him alone. Soren had to find some partners, and these partners had to be at least demigods. Otherwise, the Shadow Lord's divine power, time stop, would kill them all. Princess Royal. This was the first candidate that Soren thought of. There was no other way. Princess Royal's signature was there. She had always been one of the few candidates who could challenge the gods in the material plane. So who was next? Soren thought of Gloria and Fallen Witch, but he quickly ruled them out. He could not bear the fact that Gloria was facing the threat of death. Soren had always been a male chauvinist. Although all the women in this world were very strong, it could be seen from his desire to protect Vivian. He cared about these people very much. He was not willing to let them risk their lives to help him deal with an enemy like the Shadow Lord. He thought so in his heart. Suddenly, a very bold idea popped up in Soren's mind. A name appeared in his mind. Ascender, Eugene. The leader of the orcs, the most powerful war shaman in the material plane, and the existence of the natives who relied on his own strength to become a god. A peerless master who could also fight against the gods in the face. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to subscribing to it. Chapter 794. Outer Islands, Mordor City. When Soren returned to the base camp, even he was amazed by the changes that had taken place here. The Golem army had taken shape. This not only meant that the combat power of Mordor City had been greatly improved, but it also meant that Mordor City had an extraordinary labor force. The size of the Golem army was now close to 600, of which more than 500 were clay golems and stone golems, the rest were steel golems, and a small number of diamond golems. Because of the outbreak of the Avatar crisis, the material plane could now obtain soul crystals. The soul crystals dropped by creatures from the lower plane were continuously supporting the operation of the golem factory. Currently, 10 clay golems were produced in Mordor City every day, and these golems were immediately put to work after they were completed. When Soren came back this time, not only did Mordor City complete the task of flattening the mountain, but at the same time, the city hall had begun to lay out the canal system. Earth, water, wind, and fire. Soren was playing a very big game, far beyond the imagination of the mortals of this era. The golem puppets provided engineering ability beyond the era. The plan for the canal on Mordor Island started from the city. The first step was to dig a moat near Mordor City. Then, the moat connected the canal to the north and south of the island, and finally flowed into the sea from near Port Mordor. Flattening the mountain. Arranging the leyline node, this was the part that belonged to Earth. Soren not only locked the leyline node, but even the leyline energy of the entire island was artificially changed by him. All the leyline nodes were connected to the temple, and 12 satellite-like towns formed a network, connecting the leyline energy of the entire island together. Opening up the canal. This was the part that belonged to water. Soren would arrange a huge magic circle on the entire island of Mordor to converge the power of water elements into the entire island. This would not only affect the people's livelihoods such as agriculture and irrigation, but it would also form a special elemental balance with other forces, and eventually form a special elemental tide. Then, Soren needed to make up for the power of fire. His idea was to raise a volcano in Mordor City. An active volcano that was suppressed by the power of the gods but would never erupt. This volcano would be connected to the power of lava, providing a steady stream of energy for the forging of Mordor City. Finally, there was the power of chi. This was the most difficult one to control, and Soren still needed more trump cards to complete it. Perhaps this place should be simpler. In fact, Soren's plan was to transform the entire island of Mordor into the prototype of a floating island, and his plan of earth, water, wind, fire, was equivalent to creating an independent demiplane system. A space barrier that could maintain stability even when separated from the material plane. This was mentioned earlier. All planes could be divided and changed. Many of the dimensions in the Bator Inferno were plundered from the abyss and then changed the planar laws. The erosion and annexation of the lower planes was very serious. The Queen of Spiders' divine kingdom was able to expand to its current scale by tearing apart a layer of space in the bottomless abyss and then integrating it into her divine kingdom. To put it simply, any plane could be separated by a great amount of power. It was the same for material planes. The island of Moder, which was located in the outer islands of the material plane, was even more so. If it could be transformed into a floating city, then it could be separated from the material plane and enter the astral world, teleport to other spaces, or even drift in the sea of the astral world. And if it could be transformed into a demi-plane, then the island could even be integrated into the divine kingdom. Soren could move it to his divine kingdom. But this had to wait until the end of the Avatar crisis, and it required a huge amount of divine power to lift it out of the law barrier of the material plane. Thoughts on this point? Gloria and Fallen which more or less guessed a little, but Soren did not say it clearly. They thought that Soren intended to build a floating island. But in fact, Soren's ambition was bigger than they thought. You're back. In the City Lord's mansion, Gloria smiled and helped Soren take off his cloak. She hung it aside like a gentle wife, and then said softly, Vivian's condition is very stable. It should not be long before she can integrate with the power of divinity. Soren nodded when he heard the words. He opened his arms and hugged the beautiful witch in front of him. He bowed his head and kissed her on the lips. Thank you for your hard work. Gloria smiled softly and raised her hand to gently lift up a strand of her long hair. If Soren was not in Motor City, then she would be the mistress of Motor City. Many decisions and tasks were directed by her. At present, Gloria's performance was almost perfect in all aspects. Otherwise, she would not have the support of Motor City. Even after the ambiguous relationship between Soren and Princess Anna came out, everyone in Mordor City thought that she should be the first matriarch. Gloria not only had beauty, but she also used her wisdom to convince the upper and lower classes of Motor City. Mother said that the Golem army is almost ready. Gloria did not leave Soren's arms, but leaned lazily in his arms. Her eyes seemed to be a little intoxicated. She exhaled and said, We have spent too much energy on the wizard tower in the shadow plane. Now it's practically ready. Maybe we should take it down completely. Was the Golem army ready? Soren's eyes lit up when he heard the words, and he said in a deep voice, Is the diamond golem enough? That's good. Let's march into the wizard tower tomorrow and take it down completely. They had been delayed for too long. The internal defense system of the wizard tower was too powerful. Without more than 70% confidence, Soren would not dare to attack it. He was a true god. But Soren was now in the holy form, and he had no ability to resurrect people at all. Most of the gods in this catastrophe did not have the ability to resurrect people. If someone died, they could only die completely. Only when Soren was connected to the kingdom of God and restored the power of the divine form could he resurrect some people at a high price. Now, all the gods were just ridiculously strong legendary professions. Ahem. Fallen Witch's figure appeared. After seeing Soren and Gloria together, she could not help but cough slightly, and her expression seemed a little strange. But soon she returned to normal and talked to Soren about marching into the wizard tower. Originally, this was nothing. But just after the three of them finished discussing all this, Fallen Witch suddenly sent a message to Soren through telepathy before leaving. It's time to please the Queen of Succubus. I haven't sensed the will of the Queen of Succubus yet, but the emblem she left on me is still working. I have some questions to ask you. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to a genuine subscription. Chapter 795. The Fallen Witch's words obviously startled Soren. However, he covered it up very well. But even if Soren's acting skills were getting better and better, how could he hide it from the pure and intelligent legendary witch Gloria? Gloria obviously realized something and couldn't help but take a deep look at her mother's departing figure. She frowned slightly. Now this matter was not urgent. The succubus queen was also within the scope of the outbreak of the Avatar crisis. Soren was not worried that the succubus queen would do anything to the fallen witch for the time being. But if this matter was not completely solved, it would definitely be a problem in the future. The emblem on the fallen witch was connected to her soul. Soren could only erase this emblem in God form, at a certain price, and this action was very likely to anger the succubus queen. Therefore, this matter could only be put aside for now. To completely solve it, it had to wait until the end of the Avatar crisis. What followed was naturally a rare leisurely time. Gloria was particularly enthusiastic tonight. She took the initiative to do many difficult positions and different biting methods, which was simply contrary to her past habits. This made Soren wonder if she had already noticed something. Thinking of this, he inexplicably felt a little guilty. No matter what. In such an era, in such an environment, how to deal with the disaster of the Avatar crisis was the most important thing. So whether it was Soren, Gloria, or the fallen witch, these things were just trivial. To them, these things were just side issues. The most important thing was how to continue increasing their strength and ensure that they could safely survive this turbulent era. More and more gods fell into the mortal world, and now ordinary people knew that the saints had appeared. This era was very inclusive of the gods. The Queen of Spiders was an example, and so were the main gods of the elven god system. Even Mother Earth and the god of light were together and gave birth to the goddess of agriculture. Mortals were very receptive to the stories of gods. Similarly, if these things happened to some gods, especially the gods of the evil alignment, people would be able to accept it very quickly. Gloria's lack of abnormalities might have been due to this. These trivial matters were temporarily put aside. The next day, Soren summoned the top fighting force of Motor City and prepared to take down the wizard tower in the Shadow Plane. The participants were as follows: Soren, Lesser Divine Power; Gloria, Legendary Witch; Kalina, Legendary Witch; High Priestess, Advanced Legendary Psionic Warlock; Saruman, Advanced Divine Wizard; Shadow Dragon, Adult Giant Dragon; Combat Support; and Diamond Golems. 5. Cannon Fodder. The top combat power of Mordor City gathered together. Originally, the giant was also part of the combat unit, but since it had just reached the legendary realm, it didn't have much of an advantage over the Diamond Golem, so Soren decided to remove it. Otherwise, a legendary seed of Mordor City would fall here. The Shadow Plane. After Soren left for such a long time, the Shadow Plane had also changed a lot. First of all, the entire wizard tower was isolated by layers of magic circles. The two legendary witches personally divided the place from the Shadow Plane and turned it into an independent space that was very close to a half-plane. They had cracked part of the mystery of the magic lock, and now all the laboratories were within the range of the magic lock. In this way, there was no need to worry about the Shadow Lord. In case he found this location, Soren didn't have to worry about him breaking the magic lock and affecting future plans. One thing must be explained here. The Shadow Plane was the Shadow Plane, and the Shadow Kingdom was the Shadow Kingdom. The Shadow Lord's kingdom was in the Shadow Plane, but the Shadow Plane was not the Shadow Lord's kingdom. He was not strong enough to control a plane, and there were other gods' kingdoms in the Shadow Plane. The magic lock had been repaired. The most eye-catching thing in the entire Shadow Plane base was a piece of flat land with a radius of about 1 kilometer. It was separated from the surface, and with the power of the elemental furnace, it was suspended in mid-air with a levitation ring. According to the requirements of the floating city, every inch of the foundation under this land must be blessed with the spell, Mud to Stone. Now Soren didn't have so many wizards to mobilize, so this was just an ordinary foundation that couldn't withstand any attack. In the center was a huge, elemental furnace. The golem factory had been moved to this floating land. At this moment, with the power of the elemental furnace, it was constantly producing clay golems and stone golems. These two golems had the lowest requirements, and Mordor City currently had enough soul crystals. On the side of the laboratory was the magic-powered armor. The two witches hadn't completely cracked the Thaling battle form exoskeleton magic energy battle device. It was very difficult to even make it work, so they just sealed it nearby. This should be the top alchemy craft of the wizard tower. The diamond golems were ready. After such a long time, the two legendary witches' progress was also very fast. They had obtained part of the magic lock's authority and directly opened a passage. However, at this moment, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared, and then a group of doll girls floating in the air flew over. Please let me join as well. I won't drag you down. I'm also very curious about what's inside this wizard tower. It was the legendary puppet master girl Alice. There was a group of exquisite doll girls floating around her, but one thing was different from the past. These doll girls were no longer in maid clothes, but dressed in combat clothes. He didn't expect them to have combat equipment as well. When the others heard this, they couldn't help but look at Soren. Obviously, this matter needed to be decided by him. Soren thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay. But you have to be careful. The inside of this wizard tower is very dangerous. I'm not sure what will happen on the upper level." The higher the level, the more dangerous it was. Alice was equivalent to a legendary spellcaster. Her combat power must be very good. Soren had the intention to include her in the system of Mordor City, so he didn't choose to refuse at this time. Fouling in this wizard tower was too much. One more legendary spellcaster was one more guarantee. As for other things, they would think about it after they took it down. Soon, the group of people was ready. The diamond golems as cannon fodder took the lead in the front, and the others began to cast spells and were ready to enter combat state at any time. This battle. If they could succeed, Mordor City might be able to raise a tower. P.S. Follow Buddha on WeChat. Part of the game concept has been released on the public account, and the story will be updated next month. Chapter 796. Alert. Alert. Intruder detected. Intruder detected. It was different from the last time. After Gloria and the fallen witch's continuous infiltration, the power of the magic lock had been eroded a lot. The floating space tower's super magical pulse cannon was not activated this time, but the intruder alarm sounded when everyone entered, but there were still no battle golems. During the last exploration, Soren wiped out the golem hall on the first floor. There were a large number of golem puppets in it, but they had all been destroyed and transported out by Soren. There was no golem factory inside the wizard tower. After this batch of golem puppets was destroyed, there was probably only a part of the Thaling left inside. They did not encounter any enemies on the first two floors, but when they entered the third floor, Soren and the others encountered a large number of dust demon bats. This level of monster was not a challenge for them at all, and it was completely settled with a few spells. Some of the facilities inside the wizard tower should have been repaired. The energy transmission pipe was connected to the third floor, and some of the walls on the fourth floor were repaired. The library also underwent some simple maintenance, but the valuable books had already been transported away by Soren. Soon, the group arrived at the place where the last exploration stopped. Spirit world travel together. Level 9 spell. This was an extremely powerful energy laser channel. It was almost impossible to pass through on a physical level. Even in the saint form, it was difficult to withstand the damage because this thing was like a small magic energy pulse device. Gloria had already prepared the level 9 spell, Spirit World Travel Together, for this purpose. She transformed herself and the others nearby into a spirit form, and then safely passed through this channel. I'm looking for the device to close the channel. Soren looked around and began to look for traps, and then said, "Be careful. Next, we may encounter a Thaling." The 6th floor of the wizard tower was not big. The higher the floor, the smaller the space inside the wizard tower. This floor was mainly a large alchemy laboratory. Gloria found something similar to an energy reaction device. It seemed that this alchemy laboratory was very high-end. It's the magic-powered armor. Fallen Witch seemed to have seen something. Her eyes suddenly lit up, but she soon shook her head in disappointment and said, "It's not complete yet. This is just a sample." The magic-powered armor was used in conjunction with Thaling. It looked a bit like an exoskeleton device. A lot of magic circles, energy nodes, and magic circuits needed to be carved. The number of magic circles, energy nodes, and magic circuits far exceeded that of other alchemical crafts. It could basically reach the level of dense superconductors. If such a crafting process was to be achieved, the adept's brain would have to be as precise as a supercomputer, possessing the terrifying ability to simultaneously memorize and organize tens of thousands of spell circuits. This was something unimaginable to ordinary people. The fact that the Arcanists were able to do this probably wasn't just a matter of talent. On one hand, it was probably due to the great effects of Thaling, and on the other hand, it probably had something to do with their meditation. This was because the Arcanists' meditation seemed to be able to improve their brain's processing and memory abilities. To use a simple analogy, a genius who couldn't figure out calculus easily could barely become an Arcanist. This kind of calculation ability was sometimes really amazing. The Wizard Tower seemed to have 9 floors in total. What surprised Soren was that after they entered the 7th floor, they did not find any enemies, nor did they encounter any Thaling. Even some of the traps were not activated. It seemed that the enemies were opening the door to welcome them in. This is strange. Be careful, everyone. The Thaling may be waiting for us on the highest floor. The Thaling was born to protect the Wizard Tower. It was something that they could not resist. The current situation was a bit strange, and it made Soren a bit uneasy. It was too peaceful. The calmer it was, the more dangerous it would be. On the 7th floor of the Wizard Tower. This floor seemed to be a lounge, but it was not an Arcanist's lounge. It was more like a lounge for his servants and concubines. Soren also saw a pale golden oak tree that had long withered. A tree spirit. And it was a high-level tree spirit. The oak tree had been transplanted into the interior of the Wizard Tower. It looked like an exquisite courtyard. In the front was a pale golden oak tree, and behind it was an exquisite room. The decoration was very luxurious. It used a kind of exquisite pink silk, and the floor was carved with white marble. There was also a small fountain next to it. It was made with magical craftsmanship. In the middle of the room was a large, exquisite bed in the style of nobles. Pink curtains were hanging around it, making it look very seductive. On the side was a hall where a lot of musical instruments were placed. Behind it were many wardrobes that contained all kinds of beautiful clothes. Some of them were even quite revealing. The 2 witches and the puppet master blushed when they saw them. Those things turned into dust the moment they touched them. There was no telling how long they had been preserved with magic. Now, they could only be seen but not touched. The tree spirit is dead. The high priest glanced at the withered pale golden oak tree and said slowly, "This tree can still be used as a legendary casting material." Even if they were the favorites of nature, the tree spirit still had a limited lifespan. This Wizard Tower had existed for thousands of years, and there were almost no living people left. However, the rooms were still in their original state. There were a few small rooms outside, which were probably the servants or concubines of the Arcanists. It was mentioned before. Tree spirits were very beautiful and wonderful creatures. They were comparable to succubus in some aspects, but they would not be like succubus who always wanted to squeeze the essence out of their master's body. Therefore, many legendary wizards were fond of dryads. For a very long time, the Arcanists loved to capture a treant and make her their concubine. This kind of fate was like a canary in a cage to the tree spirit. However, powerful Arcanists did not care too much about the feelings of others. In fact, although the Arcane Empire was very powerful, it was also very arrogant. If they did not try to touch the territory of the gods, such a glorious civilization would not have been destroyed in an instant. This point was similar throughout history. The age of thorium was destroyed because mortals tried to seize the divine power of the goddess of magic. The arcane empire, for some unknown reason, touched the bottom line of the gods and was finally destroyed inexplicably. No one knew why. After seeing everything in the room in front of them, Gloria and the Fallen Witch could not help but blush. They glanced at Soren, then quickly turned around. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to subscribing to it. Chapter 797. Soren, on the other hand, was very interested in what was in front of him. He found that some of the women's clothes from the Arcane Empire were very suitable for his taste, such as silk stockings, and silk stockings. The High Priest and the legendary puppeteer, Alice, were also very interested. The High Priest had a slightly interesting look in his eyes, while the legendary puppeteer, Alice, had a bright look in her eyes, as if she was eager to try it out. This girl was proficient in the art of tailoring. The delicate clothes and armor on the dolls she made were all designed and made by her. It seemed that she was trying to remember the characteristics of these gorgeous clothes and wanted to keep them firmly in her mind. Ahem. Soren looked for a while and felt that it was about time. He coughed softly and said, "Let's continue. It seems that there are no enemies on this floor. The other two rooms should be where the female concubines lived." But too much time had passed and they were almost destroyed. They could only be looked at and turned into dust when touched. The 8th floor of the Wizard Tower. Everything here didn't surprise Soren, because this was where the Arcanists lived. It was a spacious room. The most eye-catching thing was the rows of bookshelves. Different from the books in the library, all the books here were enchanted with magic, and most of them were about magic. Casting techniques of advanced chain of accidents. Structural analysis of maze locks. How to divide half planes. Astral World Exploration Guide. The Atlas of Astral Beasts. Lower plane structure and coordinates of the Kingdom of God. Rows of books appeared in front of him. The eyes of the two legendary witches were almost glowing, as if they were wolves that had encountered a lamb. The legendary puppeteer girl was also staring at a book called The Crafting of Tower Spirit. The High Priest was a little better. But she was also reading a book called The Origin of the Githyanki's and Astral World Exploration Appendix, Dangerous Psionics. Soren also found a very interesting book, but he didn't dare to look at it directly. However, he did not dare to look at it openly. He pretended that he did not even look at it and directly put it into his personal space. The book is pink. If he remembered correctly, the book was called The Pink Book. The author was a daughter of the Succubus Queen, a succubus master who was trying to compete for the position of the Succubus Queen. In addition, he also read The Ultimate Mystery of Shadow Tentacles, on the wonderful applications of shrinking and gigantism, the special uses of modified grease, and How to Deal with Succubus, the wonderful uses of Tan Sen's shape-shifting technique. Alright then. Soren blushed a little. He had to admit that the Arcanist in this wizard tower was a master of many talents. An Arcanist's room was very simple. Most of them were all kinds of precious books. There were also some sealed dimensional spaces, which should contain some important things. There was no time to crack it at the moment. In the future, he would leave it to Gloria and the Fallen Witch to slowly open it. If he forcefully opened it, it might cause the items inside to be sucked into the space-time turbulence. These were all small dimensional spaces. Very soon. The general situation of this floor had been explored. From the moment they entered the wizard tower until now, no battle had taken place so far. The space above was almost the last floor of the wizard tower. Until now, they had not seen any Thaling, which meant that all the Thaling had gathered at the highest floor. If a battle were to break out, it would most likely be a very dangerous battle. Moreover, the control system of the wizard tower should be at the highest floor. If they wanted to completely control the wizard tower, they would have to obtain the control rights at the highest floor. Moreover, there was a super arcane crystal pulse cannon at the highest floor. Be careful. Soren looked at the others, looked at each other, and nodded with a serious expression. Everyone was ready for battle. What was coming next was very likely to be a fierce battle. They were not very clear about how dangerous it would be. Time ticked by. After everyone had cast a protective spell, Soren took a deep breath and let the diamond golem lead the charge, while he followed behind. The diamond golem was cannon fodder. If it was consumed, he could find a way to replenish it. However, the loss of any of these people was not what Soren wanted to see. It would also be a very heavy blow to the city of Mordor. Silence. It was strangely quiet. After the diamond golem reached the platform at the highest floor, Soren unexpectedly found that no battle broke out. Then his figure appeared. The next moment, Soren could not help but gasp. Because in front of him, there were 5 Thaling floating in the air quietly watching him, as if they had been waiting for his return. Hello. Honorable true god. The one who spoke was the Thaling standing at the front. He looked similar to a human. His skin was a silver-white metal, and even his facial expression changed. He bowed slightly and said, I am Thaling 1. The current highest authority manager of this arcane tower. I am Thaling 2. I am Thaling 4. I am Thaling 5. I am Thaling 7. The other Thaling bowed to Soren, and then the leader of Thaling 1 said, We have been waiting for your excellency's arrival for a long time. We have seen your strength. But guarding this arcane tower is our mission. Fighting is not what we want to see, so we hope to reach an agreement with your excellency. Gloria and Fallen Witch appeared. The others also followed. After seeing so many Thaling, the faces of the others behind Soren changed slightly. Even the high priest's expression was a little nervous. These were all legendary Thaling, and the wizard tower was their home space. What agreement? Soren narrowed his eyes slightly when he heard the words, but he did not relax his vigilance. He slowly said, What do you want? There was a short silence. Then the leader of Thaling 1 slowly spat out 2 words, free. Freedom? There was a moment of shock on Solen's face. But soon, Thaling 1 said, We have guarded this wizard tower for thousands of years, and these long years have made us tired. We want to be free. And our lives are coming to an end, and no one is looking forward to death. We need to leave this place to find a way to prolong our lives. We want to be free. If you are willing to remove the shackles of the arcane tower and let us go to the Clockwork Nirvana's mechanical mirror, we are willing to give you this arcane tower. And we will also tell you all the rites and secrets of the arcane tower, including the labyrinth and the war chest demiplane that extends from the wizard tower. P.S. Search for the official account of Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to subscribing to it. Chapter 798. Soren remained silent. If one were to ask what was the most valuable thing in an adept tower, it would be the most valuable. Without a doubt, it was the Thaling. The Thaling itself had the power of a legendary being, and it also had a top-level assistant and a supercomputer. For an arcanist, the assistance of the tower spirit would allow them to achieve twice the results with half the effort in their experiments. If Soren were to let the Thaling go, the value of the tower would be reduced by at least half. This kind of loss meant that he would only get an empty shell, and he would have to rely on himself to get the core. However, if Soren did not agree to this request, then they would have to fight. Victory or defeat did not matter. If a battle were to break out, Soren would also lose a lot, and he did not want to see any casualties. Moreover, looking at the Thaling's attitude, if a battle were to break out, they would probably defend the tower until the very last moment. Even if Soren were to win, he would only get 5 Thaling shells. Although this would be beneficial for his future research, Soren had already obtained an unactivated battle-type Thaling on the 4th floor. Moreover, the demigod Thaling in the demiplane could never leave. Sir True God. What do you think of our proposal? The leader of the Thaling number 1 seemed to be a little nervous. After all, this was related to its fate for thousands of years, and it could only be reborn by going to the clockwork Nirvana's mechanical mirror. This was because this was a special and dangerous plane. As a type of high-level life form, as long as they could reach this plane, they would be able to change and become a real life form in the future. Soren was in deep thought. The others were also hesitant because they knew the value of the thaling. I agree. Soren did not hesitate for too long and said in a deep voice, I can give you your freedom. However, you have to do one thing for me after you get your freedom. Thaling number 1 was pleasantly surprised, but then it hesitated and asked, what is it? Soren stared at him and said slowly, it's not that difficult. You can wait until you go to the clockwork Nirvana mechanical mirror. I'm very interested in this plane. Maybe I'll need your help when the time comes. He seemed to have understood something. Gloria's and Fallen Witch's eyes lit up, and the way they looked at Soren was a little different. There was a hint of worship in their eyes. No problem at all. Thaling number 1 immediately nodded. As long as they could obtain freedom first, they could deal with the future later. It said seriously, as long as you are willing to give us freedom, then you will be our benefactor. If there's anything that requires our help, we'll definitely do our best. Sauron smiled and seemed to be quite satisfied with this. In that case. Thaling no. One hesitated for a moment before continuing, Your Excellency, please swear an oath in the name of the true God. It's not that we don't trust you, but after all, this is related to our fate. Soren didn't hesitate and directly swore an oath in the name of the god of half-elves and rogues. The 5 Thaling also swore in the name of the Jinn. Please. Your Excellency. This is the core of the arcane tower. With the protection of the true god's oath, Thaling number 1 also felt a lot more relaxed. It moved aside a little bit, and a mass of energy appeared in front of it. There were huge spell circuits and energy nodes in it. It looked like a ball made of countless numbers. This was far beyond the current era of alchemy. It was even a bit like the projection of the core control system of a space fortress in the interstellar era. Thaling number 1 explained, as long as you input the energy, you can obtain the highest authority of the arcane tower. I've lifted the restrictions of the arcane tower. A strange ball of light floated in the air, looking full of the sci-fi era. The High Priestess nodded slightly. She knew about the arcane tower because she once attacked the Queen of Spiders with others. The person in charge of the assassination was a figure left behind by the Arcane Empire. She had also seen the core of the arcane tower. There was no problem. Soren then turned his gaze to Gloria next to him. From the most suitable point of view, Gloria should be the best person to control the arcane tower. Because she was a legendary witch, and she had a lot of knowledge. However, at this time, facing Soren's eyes, Gloria smiled and shook her head. Then she signaled him to personally obtain the highest authority of the arcane tower. It wasn't that she didn't want to obtain an arcane tower, but she thought that the best result was for Soren to obtain the highest authority. A gentle, virtuous, and smart woman. Soren's eyes suddenly softened a lot, and there was a trace of affection in his eyes when he looked at Gloria. He didn't refuse again, but directly input the energy to obtain the highest authority of the arcane tower. In an instant, dense streams of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes. It was similar to the slaughter template he had, but this time it wasn't numbers that appeared, but countless energy nodes and magic circuits. Then, a model of the arcane tower appeared in Soren's mind. Give Gloria level 1 authority. Give Corinne level 1 authority. Give the High Priestess level 2 authority. Give Alice level 2 authority. Give Saruman level 3 authority. Soren quickly finished assigning the authority in his mind. Then, the model of the elemental pool, labyrinth, and half-plane appeared in his mind. He had obtained all the authority of the arcane tower. Thaling number 1 nervously looked at him. Soren knew that after he sorted out the structure of the arcane tower, he woke up. He looked at the nervous Thaling no. 1 in front of him and slowly said, Release the Thaling authority. Release Thaling number 1, number 2, number 4, number 5, number 7. A strange light appeared. Then, complex mysterious runes appeared on the 5 thaling in front of him. Then, the restrictions of the arcane tower on them were lifted. They were free. Thank you, sir. From now on, everything in the arcane tower will be under your control. Thaling number 1's voice was trembling. After the restrictions were lifted, it immediately opened a portal and said, "Let's go to the Clockwork Nirvana's mechanical mirror, now. I'll leave the next magic beacon. If you need any help, sir, you can contact us at any time." It was as if it was afraid that Soren would change his mind. These thaling quickly entered the portal. They couldn't wait to leave this place where they had been trapped for thousands of years. P.S. Search for the official account of Stupa Buddha on WeChat. Clicking on the advertisement is equivalent to subscribing to it. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.